The pause before you react. The pause before you react is where a mind that protects itself begins, and it is smaller than you think. Between something happening and you responding to it, there is a gap, and in most people that gap has closed completely, so the reaction fires before any choice is made. Neuroscience calls this the difference between the fast, automatic response of the amygdala and the slower, wiser processing of the prefrontal cortex, and the whole of self-command lives in the half second between them. Think of the last time a message made your chest tighten and your thumbs were already typing a reply you would later regret. That is the gap collapsed. A protected mind widens it on purpose, learning to feel the heat rise and simply wait. One breath before deciding anything at all. Nothing is required in that pause. You do not have to fix the feeling or answer the question. You only have to notice that a moment exists between the spark and the fire, and that the moment belongs to you. This is the first and most important defense a person can build, because everything that harms you from the outside must pass through your reaction to reach you. Widen the gap, and the world loses its power to move you against your will. Tonight, you do not have to practice anything. It is enough to know that the pause is there, waiting, a small and quiet room between what happens and what you do, and that no one can take it from you, and that it has been yours all along. The space between thought and self. The space between thought and self is one of the deepest protections a human mind can develop, and almost no one is taught it. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices them. This sounds like wordplay until you feel the difference, and the difference changes everything. Cognitive psychology describes this as the shift from being fused with a thought to observing it, from "I am a failure" to "I am having the thought that I am a failure," and that small grammatical gap is the entire foundation of a stable mind. Picture a harsh thought arriving tonight, something cruel about yourself, and notice that a moment ago you were not thinking it, and a moment from now it will be gone, while you remain. You are the sky, and thoughts are the weather, and the weather is loud and convincing and always passing through. What protects you is remembering which one you are. A mind fused with every thought is at the mercy of each one, blown from despair to panic to shame as the weather turns. A mind that can watch its thoughts is anchored because it has found the one place inside that does not change. You do not have to argue with the thoughts or silence them. You only have to notice that there is a you that is aware of them, sitting slightly behind them, untouched. That awareness is the quietest and most unshakable ground you own, and it is there right now, beneath the noise, calm as still water, waiting for you to remember it is where you actually live. The feeling you can finally name. The feeling you can finally name is one that stops running you the moment you give it a word. When an emotion moves through you unnamed, it floods everything, and you become the feeling rather than a person having it. But research on emotional labeling shows something remarkable, that the simple act of naming a feeling reduces its intensity, calming the brain's alarm system almost immediately. Neuroscientists call this affect labeling, and they can watch it happen, the amygdala quieting as a word arrives. Think of a night you felt terrible with no idea why, a heavy, formless dread, and how different it felt the moment you realized, "Oh, I am afraid," or "I am grieving," or "I am simply exhausted." The feeling did not vanish, but it became a thing you could hold rather than a fog you were lost in. A protected mind builds a vocabulary for its inner life, not to control feelings, but to stop drowning in them. Naming is not the same as fixing. and it does not need to be. To say, quietly, this is disappointment, this is loneliness, this is old fear that belongs to a younger version of me, is to turn a flood into a river with banks. You do not have to solve tonight's feeling. You only have to meet it, look at it, and give it its true name, and watch how much smaller it becomes the instant it is seen. The unnamed thing owns you. The named thing becomes something you own. And that quiet act of naming is one of the gentlest forms of power a person can learn. The breath that steadies you. The breath that steadies you is the one tool for a protected mind that you carry everywhere and can never lose. Your breath is the only part of the autonomic nervous system you can consciously reach, a door between the automatic and the chosen. And through it, you can speak directly to a body that is bracing for danger. When you slow the exhale, making it longer than the inhale, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for calm, and the heart rate falls, and the alarm quiets, whether or not the mind agrees. Recall a moment of panic, the shallow, high breathing in the chest, and how it fed the fear in a loop. The breath was not just responding to the fear, it was amplifying it. A protected mind learns to reverse the loop, to drop the breath low into the belly and stretch the exhale long, and let the body lead the mind back to safety. You do not need a technique or a perfect method. You only need to remember, in the moments that matter, that the breath is there, steady and slow, always available, asking nothing. Tonight, it is already doing this for you, softening as you settle, lengthening as you rest. This is the quiet miracle of it, that in any room, any crisis, any sleepless dark, you hold the one lever that can calm your own body from the inside. No one can take the breath from you, and it will steady you every time you remember to let it, which is protection of the simplest and most complete kind. The story you are telling yourself. The story you are telling yourself is more powerful than the event it describes, and learning to hear it is a profound defense. Almost nothing reaches you as raw fact. It arrives wrapped in interpretation, in a story your mind wrote so fast you mistook it for reality. Psychologists call these automatic appraisals, the instant meanings we assign to things, and they, far more than the things themselves, decide how we feel. A friend does not text back. That is the event. They are angry with me. I have done something wrong. I am being abandoned. That is the story. And it is the story, not the silence, that ruins your evening. A protected mind learns to catch the narrator in the act. It notices the moment a plain fact becomes a frightening tale and asks, quietly, is this true, or is this simply the story I always tell? You do not have to force a happier story or pretend everything is fine. You only have to see that a story is being told, and that you did not consciously choose it, and that 100 other readings of the same fact exist. This is not denial. It is the recovery of your freedom, because a person who cannot see their own storytelling is ruled by it, while a person who can see it gets to choose. The events of your life will keep arriving, neutral and ambiguous, and your mind will keep rushing to explain them. To simply notice the explaining, without believing every word, is to take back the pen, and it is one of the quietest freedoms there is. The line between fact and fear. The line between fact and fear is one that a protected mind learns to draw again and again, because the two arrive tangled together and feel identical from the inside. A fact is what happened. Fear is what might happen, dressed up as certainty. Your mind, built to keep you alive, treats a vivid fear as though it were already real, flooding the body with the same alarm a true emergency would cause. This is why worry exhausts you, because your body cannot tell the difference between a danger imagined and a danger present. Think of a night spent bracing for a conversation that had not happened, feeling the full dread of an outcome that existed only in your head. The fear was real. The thing feared was not. A protected mind gently separates the two, asking, what do I actually know? And what am I only afraid of? Often the known facts are small and manageable, while the fear around them is enormous, and simply seeing which is which shrinks the whole thing back to a human size. You do not have to defeat the fear or prove it wrong. You only have to notice where the solid ground of fact ends and the open air of fear begins, and to stand, for a moment, on the ground. Fear will always try to speak in the voice of fact, urgent and certain, and the skill of a lifetime is learning to hear the difference. What is true is usually smaller and kinder than what you fear, and you are allowed, tonight, to rest on what is true. The control you actually have. The control you actually have is smaller than you wish and more than enough. And knowing exactly where its border lies is the oldest protection philosophy ever found. 2,000 years ago, the Stoics built their entire practice on a single distinction, the dichotomy of control, which says that some things are up to us and most things are not. Your effort is yours. The outcome is not. Your words are yours. How they are received is not. Your character is yours. Your reputation lives in other people's minds and was never in your hands at all. Consider how much of your suffering comes from trying to control the uncontrollable, another person's feelings, a result already decided, the past, the opinion of someone you will never satisfy. It is like gripping water. A protected mind learns to pour its energy only into its own sphere, the choices, the effort, the response, and to release its grip on everything beyond that border. This is not giving up. It is aiming your limited strength where it can actually work. You do not have to fix the whole world tonight, or win everyone over, or guarantee any outcome. You only have to tend the small, powerful territory that is genuinely yours. Everything outside it you are allowed to set down, not because you do not care, but because holding it was never possible and only ever drained you. There is a deep peace in this border, in knowing precisely what is yours to carry and what was never yours at all. And it is a peace no external event can take. The judgment you can delay. The judgment you can delay is a quiet power that most people never discover they have. The mind judges instantly, sorting everything into good or bad, safe or dangerous, before you have any real information. And then it defends that snap verdict as though your life depended on it. But a first impression is only a guess made by a nervous system in a hurry. Psychologists describe this rush to conclusion as the mind's hunger for closure, its discomfort with not knowing, which pushes it to decide fast and stay decided. Think of a time you judged a person, a situation, even yourself, harshly and immediately, only to learn later how wrong you were, how much you could not see. A protected mind learns to hold its verdicts loosely, to say, I do not know yet, and to mean it without anxiety. This is not indecision. It is the strength to tolerate uncertainty long enough for the truth to arrive. You do not have to have an opinion on everything tonight, or resolve every open question, or decide what something means before you understand it. You are allowed to let things stay unfinished, to leave the verdict open, to say quietly that the jury is still out. There is enormous relief in this, in releasing the pressure to judge instantly and be certain always. The world grows softer and more accurate when you stop forcing it into conclusions. And a mind that can rest in not yet knowing is far harder to manipulate, far harder to panic, and far more at peace than one that must decide everything at once. The silence you can sit inside. The silence you can sit inside is a shelter that a protected mind builds and returns to, and most people flee from it because they were never shown it was safe. The moment quiet arrives, the reaching begins for the phone, the noise, the distraction, anything to fill the space, because in silence the mind's contents rise to the surface, and that can feel like danger. But it is not danger. It is only the unattended parts of you finally getting a hearing. Research on our discomfort with stillness suggests that many people would rather receive a small shock than sit alone with their thoughts. So trained are we to escape our own company. A protected mind reverses this, slowly, learning that silence is not empty but full, and that what rises in it is not an attack, but a message. Think of how rarely you are truly alone with yourself, unentertained, unoccupied, and how strange the quiet feels at first. A protected mind makes friends with that quiet, discovering that beneath the initial restlessness lies a deep and steadying calm, the sound of your own presence. You do not have to fill tonight's silence. You do not have to fear what surfaces in it. You only have to sit and breathe and let the quiet be what it is, a room you are allowed to rest in rather than escape. The person who can sit inside their own silence is free in a way that no amount of noise can offer, because they no longer need the world to distract them from themselves. The trigger you see coming loses most of its power, and learning to recognize your own is one of the most practical defenses a mind can build. A trigger is a small, present-day event that opens a large, past-shaped wound, and it always feels like the present, though it is powered by the past. Someone's tone, a certain silence, a particular kind of criticism, and suddenly, your reaction is far bigger than the moment deserves, because the moment has quietly reached back and touched something old. Trauma researchers describe this as an emotional flashback, a flooding of old feeling with no memory attached, so it arrives, feeling like now. Think of the last time your reaction surprised even you, its size, its speed, and how afterward you could not fully explain it. That was a trigger firing. A protected mind learns its own map, the specific situations that reliably set it off, not to avoid life, but to see the reaction coming and hold it with understanding. When you can say, in the moment, this is one of my old wounds speaking, not the whole truth of this situation, the trigger loses its grip. You do not have to heal everything tonight or hunt down every root. You only have to begin to notice the pattern, the recurring places where your reaction outruns the event. That noticing is the beginning of freedom, because a trigger you cannot see owns you completely, and a trigger you can see becomes a place of gentleness toward yourself, a signal not that something is wrong with you, but that something in you is still tender and asking to be met with care. The mind you can watch. The mind you can watch is a mind that can no longer fully run you, and this single capacity underlies every protection in this entire descent. There is thinking, and there is the awareness of thinking, and they are not the same. And the gap between them is where your freedom lives. Contemplative traditions have known this for thousands of years, and modern psychology has confirmed it, that the ability to observe your own mental processes, sometimes called metacognition, is central to emotional stability. When you can watch a thought arise, peak, and pass without being swept away by it, you have found the one stable point in the whole moving system. Think of a spiral of worry, one anxious thought pulling in the next, and how, if even for a second, you could step back and see the spiral as a spiral, its power changed. You were no longer inside it. You were watching it. A protected mind practices this watching, gently and without strain, until the watcher becomes a familiar place to stand. You do not have to stop the thoughts, which cannot be stopped, or empty the mind, which cannot be emptied. You only have to notice that you can observe, that behind every thought sits a quiet awareness that is not disturbed by any of them. That awareness is you, more truly than any passing thought, and it is calm, and it is always here. Tonight, as thoughts drift by, you might simply notice yourself noticing them, and feel how that small shift loosens their hold and rest in the one place inside you that has never once been afraid. The ground beneath your reactions. The ground beneath your reactions is what these first levels have been quietly building. The stable floor a protected mind stands on when everything around it moves. Reactions are the surface, fast and loud and weather-like, but beneath them, if you have laid the foundation, is something that does not move, a steadiness made of the pause, the breath, the naming, the watching. Psychology calls the ability to stay grounded through emotional storms self-regulation, and it is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of an anchor beneath the feeling. Think of two people receiving the same bad news, one swept completely away, the other shaken but somehow still standing, still able to breathe, still themselves. The difference is not that the second person feels less. It is that they have ground beneath them. A protected mind builds this ground slowly, in 1,000 small moments of pausing instead of reacting, of watching instead of drowning, until steadiness becomes less a skill and more a place you live. You do not have to be unshakable tonight, or feel nothing, or rise above your own humanity. You only have to know that the ground is being built, level by level, breath by breath, and that it holds more each day. Everything that comes at you from the outside meets this ground first, and a mind with ground beneath it cannot be knocked over by every passing storm. This is the foundation, and it is enough for now. Rest on it. It is holding you already, quietly, beneath every reaction, steady as the earth, and it will still be there in the morning. The bias toward the worst. The bias toward the worst is a tilt built into every human mind, and simply knowing it exists begins to correct it. Your brain evolved in a world where missing a threat could kill you, and overreacting merely cost a little energy, so it learned to weight danger far more heavily than safety. Psychologists call this the negativity bias. The reason a single piece of criticism outweighs 10 compliments. The reason one bad moment can define an entire good day. Think of an evening where everything went well except one awkward exchange, and how it was the awkward exchange that followed you to bed, replaying while the good hours vanished. That is not a flaw in you. It is ancient wiring doing exactly what it was built to do, protecting a creature that no longer faces those dangers. A protected mind learns to see the tilt and gently correct for it, to remember that the mind's first reading is weighted toward threat, and is therefore usually darker than the truth. You do not have to force false positivity or pretend the bad thing did not happen. You only have to know that your instrument runs dark, that it magnifies the negative by design, and to add a quiet grain of salt to its most frightening reports. When the mind insists that everything is terrible, you can answer softly that this is the negativity bias speaking, not the whole of reality. And in that small correction is a great deal of peace, because a mind that knows its own tilt can finally begin to see level ground. The proof you only look for. The proof you only look for is one of the quietest traps the mind sets, and escaping it sharpens every judgment you make. Once you believe something, your mind stops searching for the truth and starts searching for confirmation, noticing everything that supports the belief and quietly ignoring everything that does not. Psychology calls this confirmation bias, and it runs beneath awareness, which is exactly what makes it so powerful. Believe someone dislikes you, and you will collect their every cool glance as evidence while overlooking their every kindness. Believe you always fail, and your mind will file each stumble and lose the receipts for every success. Think of a conviction you hold about yourself, a hard one, and consider that you may have spent years gathering proof for it while discarding everything that argued the other way. A protected mind learns to distrust its own certainty a little, to ask what it might be filtering out, to go looking, on purpose, for the evidence it has been ignoring. You do not have to overturn every belief tonight or prove yourself wrong. You only have to loosen your grip enough to wonder whether you have been reading a rigged trial, admitting only the witnesses that agree with the verdict you already reached. The moment you suspect your own filter, the world grows larger and fairer, and many of the beliefs that caused you pain turn out to have been built on carefully selected evidence. To see the filter is to begin to see past it, and that is a clearer and kinder way to live. The spotlight that is not there. The spotlight that is not there is an illusion that causes enormous, needless suffering, and dissolving it sets you free in rooms full of people. You walk through the world feeling watched, certain that others are noticing your flaws, your mistakes, the stain on your shirt, the clumsy thing you said, replaying it. But they are not. Psychologists name this the spotlight effect, the deep and mistaken belief that other people are paying far more attention to us than they actually are. The truth is that everyone is starring in their own show, absorbed in their own imagined spotlight, with almost no attention left over for yours. Think of a moment you felt exposed and mortified, sure the whole room had registered your error, and ask honestly how much you remember about anyone else's small mistakes that day. Almost nothing. That is how much they remember of yours. A protected mind takes deep comfort in this, in realizing that the audience it fears is not watching, that the scrutiny it dreads exists mostly in its own head. You do not have to perform for a crowd that is not looking or shrink from a judgment that is not being made. You are far freer than you feel. The spotlight you sense is a projection, and once you see it for what it is, whole rooms open up, whole possibilities become available, because you are no longer editing yourself for an audience that was always, in truth, looking somewhere else entirely. The feeling you mistake for fact. The feeling you mistake for fact is one of the most common ways a mind is led astray, and separating the two is a lifelong protection. A feeling is real, but it is not evidence. You can feel worthless and have great worth. You can feel doomed and be perfectly safe. You can feel certain and be entirely wrong. Yet the mind treats emotion as proof, reasoning that because something feels true, it must be. A shortcut psychologists call emotional reasoning. It is one of the most reliable engines of unnecessary suffering. Think of a low evening when you felt, with total conviction, that your life was going nowhere, and how by morning, rested, the same life looked ordinary and workable. Nothing had changed but the feeling, and the feeling had been posing as fact. A protected mind learns to honor its feelings without obeying them as truth, to say, I feel this strongly, and that does not make it real. You do not have to argue with the emotion or push it away. You only have to hold it a little more loosely, to remember that feelings are weather passing through, vivid and convincing and temporary, and that the facts of your life are usually steadier and kinder than the mood reporting on them. When a feeling insists it is the truth, you can thank it for its message and still check the message against reality. That small separation between what you feel and what is so is one of the clearest-eyed things a person can learn, and it returns solid ground beneath the shifting weather of the heart. The memory that rewrites itself. The memory that rewrites itself is a fact about the mind that humbles us all, and knowing it protects you from a false and often painful past. You experience memory as a recording, a faithful playback of what happened. It is nothing of the kind. Each time you recall an event, your mind reconstructs it, and in reconstructing it, subtly changes it, coloring it with your current mood, your later knowledge, your accumulated stories. Researchers have shown that memories shift with every retrieval, growing more certain and less accurate at once. Think of a painful memory you have replayed for years, and consider that the version you now hold may be more shaped by the retelling than by the original day, darkened a little more with each return. A protected mind holds its memories, especially the painful ones, with a certain gentleness, knowing they are not perfect records, but living, changing things. You do not have to trust every dark memory as the literal truth, or let a reconstructed past dictate your present. You only have to loosen your certainty, to allow that the story may have drifted, that the person you resent or the failure you replay may not be exactly as your mind now insists. This is not to deny what happened, but to free yourself from a version that may have grown crueler than the truth. Your past is not a fixed sentence carved in stone. It is a story still being told, and a mind that knows this can begin, very gently, to hold even old wounds more lightly. The comparison that robs you. The comparison that robs you is a habit so constant that most people never notice it running, and interrupting it returns a stolen peace. The mind measures endlessly, ranking you against others in wealth, looks, success, happiness, and the comparison almost always leaves you diminished because you compare your full, messy inside to everyone else's polished outside. Social psychologists have studied this for decades, and the arrival of curated feeds has poured fuel on an ancient fire. Think of scrolling through images of other lives and the quiet ache that follows, the sense of falling behind, and how it was manufactured entirely by a comparison you did not choose to make. You were content moments before. A protected mind learns to catch the comparison in the act and to remember its dishonesty, that you are weighing your behind the scenes against everyone else's highlight reel, a contest rigged to make you lose. You do not have to win the comparison or silence it forever. You only have to notice when it starts and to gently decline the game, returning your attention to your own life, which was enough before the measuring began. The people you envy have their own 3 a.m., their own struggles carefully kept off screen. There is no one whose life would not look enviable from the outside and difficult from within. To step out of the ranking, even for a night, is to recover something the comparison quietly stole, the simple, sufficient experience of your own life, lived from the inside, needing no one else's to measure against. The certainty you cannot trust. The certainty you cannot trust is one of the mind's most convincing performances, and learning to doubt it wisely is a rare protection. The feeling of being certain is just that, a feeling, and it does not reliably track the truth. Some of your most confident beliefs have been wrong, and some of your quietest hunches have been right. Yet the sensation of certainty attaches itself wherever it likes. Psychologists studying overconfidence find that the strength of a conviction is a poor guide to its accuracy, and that the least skilled are often the most sure. Think of a time you were absolutely certain about someone's motives, or a coming disaster, or your own inadequacy, and how completely wrong that certainty turned out to be. It felt exactly as convincing as the beliefs that were true. A protected mind holds even its strong convictions with a little humility, knowing that certainty is a feeling, not a proof, and that the most dangerous errors come dressed in total confidence. You do not have to doubt everything or live in paralysis. You only have to remember that being sure is not the same as being right, and to leave a small door open, especially on the beliefs that hurt you most. There is freedom in this humility, because a mind that can say, "I might be wrong about this," is a mind that can learn, can change, can be reached. While a mind locked in certainty is trapped inside whatever it happens to believe, including all the frightening things it has never once thought to question. The mood that colors everything. The mood that colors everything is a lens you forget you are wearing, and remembering it is on can save you from believing its every distortion. Your mood does not just affect how you feel, it changes how you see, quietly recoloring your entire perception of your life, your relationships, your future. In a low mood, everything looks bleaker, your problems larger, your options fewer, and the mind mistakes this coloring for clear sight. Psychologists call this mood-congruent cognition, the way a feeling recruits thoughts that match it, building a convincing case for its own continuation. Think of how the very same life can feel hopeful on a good morning and hopeless on a bad night, though nothing in it has changed but the light you are seeing it by. A protected mind learns to distrust the conclusions it reaches in a dark mood, to say, "I am seeing through gray glass right now, and the world is not as this makes it look." You do not have to fix the mood or force a brighter one. You only have to know that the lens is there, tinting everything, and to postpone your big judgments about your life until the light has changed. The despair that feels like truth at midnight is usually just the mood wearing the mask of insight. To recognize the coloring is to stop being ruled by it, to let the dark moods pass through without signing their conclusions, and to trust that the clearer view will return with the morning, as it always has. The blame you aim too fast. The blame you aim too fast is a reflex that distorts your reading of everyone, including yourself, and slowing it makes you both fairer and calmer. When something goes wrong, the mind rushes to assign fault, and it does so with a curious double standard. When others stumble, we blame their character. When we stumble, we blame our circumstances. Psychologists call this the fundamental attribution error, and it quietly poisons how we see people. The driver who cuts you off is a reckless fool. When you do the same, you are simply distracted, having a hard day. Think of how quickly you have judged someone's whole nature from a single action, never seeing the pressures they were under, the story you could not see. A protected mind learns to slow the blame, to remember that behind almost every behavior is a context invisible to you, and that people are far more shaped by their situations than a snap judgment allows. You do not have to excuse everything or think well of everyone. You only have to loosen the fast, harsh verdict to grant others the same benefit of the doubt you instinctively grant yourself. This makes you harder to manipulate through outrage and gentler in 100 daily moments. And when you turn the same understanding inward, refusing to brand your whole self from a single failure, you find a rare fairness toward yourself as well. The world is full of people doing their best inside pressures you cannot see, and a mind that remembers this carries far less anger and far more peace. The perfection that paralyzes. The perfection that paralyzes is a standard disguised as a virtue, and seeing through it frees an enormous amount of stuck energy. Perfectionism presents itself as high standards, as care, as excellence, but underneath it often hides a fear that anything less than flawless will expose you as inadequate. So you delay, polish, and avoid, because a thing not attempted cannot be failed, and a mind holding an impossible standard would rather freeze than fall short. Researchers distinguish healthy striving from this anxious perfectionism and find the latter linked not to achievement, but to procrastination and distress. Think of something you have wanted to begin and kept postponing until conditions were right, until you were ready, until you could do it well, and how the waiting itself became the failure. A protected mind learns to see perfectionism as the fear it is, and to value the courage of the imperfect attempt over the safety of the flawless plan never begun. You do not have to lower your care or stop wanting to do well. You only have to release the paralyzing demand that it be perfect, to let good enough be genuinely enough, to allow yourself to begin badly and improve. There is deep freedom in this, in permitting yourself to be a learner, a beginner, a human who makes mistakes and grows through them. The perfect version exists only in your head and blocks the real one from ever being born. To choose the imperfect, living attempt over the perfect, frozen ideal is to reclaim a life the fear had quietly put on hold. The regret that teaches nothing. The regret that teaches nothing is a weight many people carry for decades, and learning to tell useful regret from the useless kind sets much of it down. Regret has a purpose when it teaches, when it shows you a lesson you can carry forward. But most of the regret that haunts us at night has already taught whatever it can, and now only punishes, replaying old choices as though enough suffering could reach back and change them. Psychologists note that we tend to regret most the roads not taken, the actions we did not dare, and that these counterfactual lives glow with an unfair, untested perfection. Think of a choice you have punished yourself for again and again, long after any lesson was learned, and ask what the endless replaying actually accomplishes now. A protected mind learns to extract the lesson from a regret, and then, gently, to set the rest down, refusing to serve a life sentence for a mistake already understood. You do not have to approve of every past choice or pretend it did not matter. You only have to see when the regret has finished teaching and begun merely wounding, and to release your grip on a past you cannot revise. The version of you who made that choice had only the information and the strength they had then. They did not know what you now know. To forgive them is not to excuse the error, but to stop bleeding from it. And a mind that can do this walks lighter, carrying forward the wisdom while finally laying down the weight. The future you keep rehearsing. The future you keep rehearsing is a habit that steals the present and rarely prepares you for anything, and interrupting it returns you to the only time you can actually live in. The anxious mind loves to rehearse, running tomorrow's conversation, next week's decision, the imagined disaster again and again, believing that enough mental practice will make it safe. But the rehearsed future almost never matches the real one, so the practice is for a scene that will not be performed. Psychologists find that this kind of anticipatory worry produces the stress of an event without any of its resolution, so you suffer the hardship in advance and gain nothing. Think of the hours you have spent living through a future moment that, when it finally came, unfolded completely differently. All that rehearsal wasted, all that peace spent for nothing. A protected mind learns to catch itself rehearsing and to return gently to now, to the breath, to the actual room it is sitting in. You do not have to solve the future tonight or plan for every possibility. You only have to notice when your mind has left the present to suffer in an imaginary one and to bring it home. The future will arrive in its own time, carrying surprises no rehearsal predicted, and you will meet it with the resources of that moment, not this one. There is a quiet relief in releasing tomorrow and resting in tonight, in trusting that you do not have to pre-live your life to survive it, and that the present, this breath, is the only ground that has ever actually held you. The clear eye you are building. The clear eye you are building is what this tier has been quietly assembling, the capacity to see your own mind's distortions, and, in seeing them, to look past them. Every level here has named a way the mind bends the truth, toward the negative, toward confirmation, toward comparison, toward false certainty and borrowed moods. And each one, once seen, loses a measure of its power. Cognitive scientists describe the mind not as a clear window on reality, but as an active storyteller, constantly constructing the world it then presents to you as simple fact. To know this is the beginning of real clarity. Think of how much lighter a moment becomes the instant you recognize your own bias inside it, the negativity tilt, the rigged filter, the imagined spotlight, and how the recognition itself creates a small space of freedom. A protected mind does not achieve perfect vision, which no human has. It achieves something better and more humble, an awareness of its own lens, a habit of gently questioning its first, most frightening readings. You do not have to see flawlessly or trust nothing you perceive. You only have to hold your perceptions with a little more lightness, knowing they are stories your mind is telling, usually darker than the truth. This is the clear eye, not a cold detachment, but a warm and honest humility. And it protects you more than certainty ever could. Rest tonight in the knowledge that you are learning to see your own seeing, and that a mind which can watch itself distort is already most of the way to seeing clear. The words and the body beneath. The words and the body beneath them often tell two different stories, and learning to notice the gap protects you from being misled. Communication is only partly verbal. Beneath the sentence runs a second channel, the tone, the posture, the tightness around the eyes, and when the two channels disagree, the body is usually the more honest one. Researchers who study nonverbal behavior find that we leak our true feeling through 100 small signals we cannot fully control, even as our words say something smoother. Think of a time someone told you they were fine while everything about them, the flat voice, the turned shoulder, the too quick smile, said otherwise. And how you knew, without knowing how you knew. A protected mind learns to listen to both channels at once, to notice when the words and the body diverge, and to gently trust the quieter, truer one. This is not suspicion or constant analysis, which would exhaust you and poison your relationships. It is simply a soft attentiveness, a willingness to feel the whole of what someone is communicating rather than only the surface of their sentence. You do not have to interrogate anyone or announce what you notice. You only have to let yourself register the fuller picture, the person beneath the words, and to hold what you sense with kindness. Most of the time, the gap you notice is not deception but pain. Someone saying they are fine because they cannot yet say they are not. To read the body beneath the words is to understand people more deeply and to be caught off guard by them far less. And both of those are quiet forms of safety. The silence that says the most. The silence that says the most is one of the richest signals in all of human communication, and learning to read it tells you what words often hide. People reveal themselves not only in what they say, but in what they leave unsaid, in the topic carefully avoided, the question not answered, the pause before a reply. Silence has texture and meaning, and a protected mind learns to feel it. Psychologists note that avoidance is itself a message, that what a person cannot or will not discuss often marks exactly where the truth lives. Think of a conversation where someone smoothly changed the subject every time a certain topic arose, and how that pattern of avoidance told you more than any answer would have. The gap was the information. A protected mind attends to these silences without paranoia, simply noticing where the conversation will not go. What is being stepped around? Which questions produce a sudden change of direction? You do not have to force the silence open or confront what you notice. You only have to register it, to understand that the shape of what someone avoids reveals the shape of what matters to them or what they fear. This makes you far harder to mislead, because you stop taking the fluent surface of a conversation as the whole of it. And it makes you a deeper listener too, more attuned to the unspoken weight people carry. The loudest thing in many exchanges is the thing no one is saying, and a mind that can hear silence is protected against a great deal that words are designed to conceal. The kindness with a price tag. The kindness with a price tag is one of the most important distinctions a protected mind can learn, because it separates genuine care from a transaction wearing its face. Real generosity gives freely, expecting nothing. But some kindness is an investment, an opening move, offered so that a debt is quietly created, to be called in later. The difference is not always visible at first, but it can be felt over time. Social psychologists describe the norm of reciprocity, our deep instinct to repay what we receive, and note that this instinct can be exploited, that a gift can be used to obligate. Think of a time someone was generous to you, and you later felt, with a faint unease, that a bill was being presented, that the kindness had come with strings you never agreed to. A protected mind learns to notice the feeling of a debt being manufactured, the subtle pressure that follows a gift given for leverage rather than love. You do not have to become cynical about kindness or refuse every generosity. Most kindness is real, and to distrust all of it would be its own kind of poverty. You only have to stay awake to the difference, to notice when a gift arrives with a hook in it, when generosity is really a purchase. Genuine care leaves you feeling free. Transactional kindness leaves you feeling indebted, watched, subtly owned. To tell the two apart is to protect your freedom without closing your heart. And that balance, open but not naive, is one of the finest things a mind can learn. The anger that is really fear. The anger that is really fear is one of the most useful things to understand about people, because it changes what you see when someone lashes out. Anger is rarely the first feeling. It is usually the armor over a softer one, over fear, over hurt, over shame. A secondary emotion that rises to protect a wound the person cannot show. When someone attacks, they are often defending, and the ferocity is a measure of how frightened or hurt they feel underneath. Emotion researchers describe anger as frequently reactive, a shield thrown up over a more vulnerable feeling. Think of a moment someone snapped at you with a force that seemed out of proportion, and how later you understood they had been scared or embarrassed or in pain, and the anger had been the only feeling they knew how to show. A protected mind learns to look beneath the anger of others, not to excuse cruelty, but to understand it, to ask what fear this rage is guarding. This changes everything about how you receive it. You do not have to absorb the attack as truth or answer fury with fury. You only have to see, quietly, that the person before you is frightened in a way they cannot admit, and that their anger is a wound wearing armor. This understanding protects you from taking the attack personally and from being pulled into a spiral of matching rage. It lets you stay steady when others cannot, seeing the scared human beneath the loud one, and responding, when you can, to the fear rather than the fire. The charm that arrives too fast. The charm that arrives too fast is a signal worth noticing, because genuine closeness takes time, and a rush toward intimacy can be a technique rather than a feeling. Real trust is built slowly, through many small moments of reliability. But some people offer intense warmth almost immediately, a flood of attention, flattery, and connection that feels intoxicating and slightly unreal. Those who study manipulation describe an early pattern of overwhelming charm, sometimes called love bombing, used to lower defenses fast and create dependence before character has been revealed. Think of a time someone made you feel, very quickly, like the most special person alive, and how the sheer speed of it, in hindsight, was itself the warning. A protected mind learns to enjoy warmth while noticing its pace, to feel a gentle caution when intimacy arrives faster than trust could possibly have earned it. You do not have to reject warmth or assume the worst of every kind. Most warm people are simply warm. You only have to let time be your ally, to allow connection to prove itself gradually, to notice when someone is trying to skip the slow work of earning trust and manufacture closeness instead. Real affection can wait. It does not need to overwhelm you into commitment before you have seen who someone actually is. To let relationships unfold at the speed of genuine trust, rather than the speed of a charm offensive, is to protect yourself from those who use intensity as a shortcut, while leaving your heart fully open to the real thing when it comes. The person who mirrors you. The person who mirrors you can be revealing your kindred spirit or quietly studying you, and learning to tell which is a subtle protection. Human beings naturally sync with those they feel close to, echoing posture, pace, and language without meaning to, a warm and unconscious sign of genuine rapport. But mirroring can also be deliberate, a technique to create false rapport fast, to make you feel understood before understanding has been earned. Researchers of social influence note that matching someone's body and speech builds instant, sometimes artificial, liking. Think of a time someone seemed to agree with everything, share all your tastes, finish your sentences, and how it felt wonderful, until a small part of you wondered whether anyone could truly be that identical to you. A protected mind enjoys real resonance, while staying gently aware that perfect agreement can be a performance. You do not have to distrust everyone who shares your views or dampen the joy of a true connection. Real kinship is one of life's great gifts. You only have to notice when the mirroring is too total, too fast, too clearly aimed at pleasing you, when someone seems to have no edges of their own. A genuine person will eventually differ from you, disagree, reveal a separate self, and that friction is the mark of something real. A mirror with no differences of its own may be reflecting you back on purpose. To notice this is not to become cold, but to prize the connections that can hold a difference, and to hold lightly the ones that only ever agree. The story everyone tells themselves. The story everyone tells themselves is the key to understanding almost anyone, because no one experiences themselves as the villain of their own life. Every person, however they behave, has an inner narrative in which their actions make sense, in which they are justified, reasonable, doing their best. Understanding this does not excuse harm, but it explains behavior that otherwise seems baffling. Psychologists describe the mind's drive to maintain a coherent, favorable self-image, the way we rewrite our own motives to keep the story flattering. Think of someone whose actions hurt you and seemed inexplicable, and how, if you could see their inner story, the pressures and fears and justifications invisible to you, their behavior would at least make a kind of sense from inside their world. A protected mind learns to ask, quietly, what story is this person living inside? What makes their behavior feel reasonable to them? This is one of the most powerful tools for reading people because it lets you predict and understand them rather than only reacting. You do not have to agree with anyone's story or forgive what it produces. You only have to grasp that everyone is the protagonist of their own account, acting in ways that fit their private logic. This understanding cools your anger, sharpens your insight, and makes you far harder to blindside, because you stop expecting people to behave according to your logic and start seeing the shape of theirs. To understand the story someone tells themselves is to hold a map of how they will act, and that map is a quiet and lasting form of protection. The need hiding under the anger. The need hiding under the anger is often the real message, and learning to hear it changes difficult people from threats into puzzles you can understand. When someone is demanding, controlling, or hostile, there is almost always an unmet need driving the behavior, a need for respect, for security, for control in a life that feels out of control, for love they do not know how to ask for directly. The unpleasant behavior is a poor strategy aimed at a real hunger. Psychologists who study communication suggest that behind every complaint or attack lies a request that the person cannot make cleanly. Think of someone whose constant criticism wore you down, and how, beneath it, might have lived a desperate need to feel valued, or safe, or in some way, enough. A protected mind learns to listen past the behavior to the need beneath, not to excuse the behavior, but to understand what is actually being sought. This gives you options a purely reactive person never has. You do not have to meet the need or tolerate the behavior. You only have to see what is underneath it, because a person you understand cannot frighten or confuse you the way a person you only react to can. Seeing the need beneath the anger returns your steadiness, lets you respond to the human rather than the strategy, and sometimes, simply by naming the real need with kindness, diffuses the whole storm. The loudest, hardest behaviors are usually the clumsiest attempts to meet a tender, ordinary need, and a mind that can see this is protected against being ruled by other people's storms. The boundary you can feel tested. The boundary you can feel tested is a signal your body sends before your mind has words for it, and learning to trust it is a core protection. People with poor intentions rarely arrive with an obvious violation. They test gently, with a small comment, a minor overstep, a request that is slightly too much, and they watch how you respond. Your compliance with the small test tells them how much larger they can go. Those who study coercive behavior describe this incremental testing of limits, each accepted overstep opening the door to a bigger one. Think of a time you felt a flicker of discomfort at something small, brushed it aside as nothing, and later found that the small thing had been the first step of a much larger pattern. That flicker was information. A protected mind learns to honor the early signal, the quiet internal no that arrives before you can justify it, and to hold a boundary at the small test rather than waiting for the large violation. You do not have to become rigid or treat every request as an attack. Most people asking things of you mean no harm, You only have to trust the discomfort when it comes, to let a clear, calm boundary meet the first gentle overstep, because a limit held early is easy, and a limit held late, after many accepted tests, is a war. Your instinct is often reading the situation before your reasoning catches up. To respect that early flicker, to say a quiet no to the small test, is to protect yourself long before a problem grows large enough to see. The pattern over the promise. The pattern over the promise is one of the most protective principles a mind can hold, because people show you who they are through what they repeatedly do, not through what they say they will do. Words are cheap and easy, and often sincere in the moment and forgotten by morning. Behavior over time is the truth. When someone's promises and their patterns disagree, a protected mind learns to believe the pattern. Behavioral science is clear that past behavior, consistently repeated, is the best predictor of future behavior, far better than stated intention. Think of someone who apologized beautifully and changed nothing, whose promises were always heartfelt and whose actions were always the same, and how long you believe the words over the record. A protected mind watches what people do across time, gently, without keeping a hostile ledger, and lets the pattern speak louder than any single promise or apology. You do not have to become suspicious of everyone's word or refuse to forgive. You only have to weight behavior over declaration, to notice when someone's repeated actions tell a different story than their reassurances. This protects you from the specific pain of believing in a version of someone that their conduct keeps disproving. People can genuinely mean their promises and still be governed by their patterns. To watch what someone actually does, again and again, is not cynicism. It is clear sight, and it spares you from investing your trust in words that the person's own behavior will not keep. The consistency that reveals them. The consistency that reveals them is a quiet test that tells you who a person truly is, because character shows most clearly in how steadily someone behaves across different situations and different audiences. Some people are one person to those they wish to impress, and another to those they think cannot help them. And the gap between the two is where the truth lives. A protected mind watches not the performance for important people, but the behavior when no advantage is at stake. Psychologists distinguish between the self we present and the self that emerges when we believe no one is watching or nothing can be gained. Think of someone charming to their superiors and cold to those below them, and how that inconsistency told you more about their character than any of their charm. A protected mind attends to this, noticing whether kindness is universal or strategic, whether respect is given only where it is useful. You do not have to test people or set traps. You only have to observe, over time, whether someone is the same person regardless of who can do something for them. Genuine character is consistent. It treats the powerful and the powerless with the same basic regard, because it comes from within rather than from calculation. A kindness that switches on and off according to usefulness is not kindness, but strategy. To notice the difference is to see people clearly, and to invest your deepest trust in those whose good behavior does not depend on an audience or a benefit, which is one of the surest protections there is. The way they treat the waiter. The way they treat the waiter is one of the oldest and truest windows into a person's character, because it shows how they behave towards someone who can offer them no advantage. Anyone can be gracious to a person they wish to impress. But the way someone treats those who serve them, those they will never need, those who cannot advance their interests, reveals the character underneath the performance. This is sometimes called the waiter rule, and many who have hired and judged people over long careers swear by it. Think of watching someone be warm and impressive to you, and then dismissive, cold, or contemptuous to a server, a clerk, a stranger, and how that single contrast rearranged everything you thought you knew about them. A protected mind pays quiet attention to these moments, to how a person treats the people around the edges of a situation, because that is where the real self, unguarded and unstrategic, shows. You do not have to judge harshly or announce what you notice. You only have to let it inform you, to understand that someone who is kind, only upward and cold downward, has revealed the true shape of their regard. Warmth that flows only toward the useful is not warmth. And a person who is decent to everyone, including those who can do nothing for them, has shown you a character you can trust. To watch these small, telling moments is to read people at their truest, and it protects you by revealing, early and clearly, who someone actually is beneath the face they choose to show you. The calm eye you read people with. The calm eye you read people with is what this tier has been building. The ability to understand others clearly without fear, suspicion, or the exhausting hypervigilance that mistakes everyone for a threat. Every topic here has offered a way to see people more truly. The body beneath the words, the need beneath the anger, the pattern beneath the promise, and together they form not a defensive crouch, but a calm, open clarity. This is the crucial balance. Reading people is a protection only if it comes from steadiness, not from anxiety. Because a frightened mind reads threats everywhere and trusts no one, which is its own kind of prison. Think of the difference between watching people warily, braced for betrayal, and watching them with calm interest, seeing them clearly while remaining open. The first exhausts and isolates you. The second protects and connects you. A protected mind reads others from a place of security, understanding them deeply while assuming good faith until the pattern proves otherwise. You do not have to suspect everyone or turn every interaction into an analysis. That would cost you the very connection that makes life worth protecting. You only have to carry a quiet, warm attentiveness, seeing people as they are, neither naive nor paranoid, open-hearted, but clear-eyed. This is the calm eye, and it is the safest way to move through a world of other people, because it neither traps you in fear nor leaves you defenseless. Rest tonight in knowing you are learning to understand others without losing your warmth, to see clearly while staying open, which is the rarest and most graceful protection of all. The small yes that leads you. The small yes that leads you is one of the most common ways people are guided, step by step, towards something they never would have agreed to all at once. It begins with a request so small you cannot reasonably refuse it. And once you have said yes, a quiet pressure forms to stay consistent with that yes. So the next, slightly larger request feels natural to accept too. Psychologists call this the foot in the door effect, built on our deep need to act in line with what we have already done. Think of a time you agreed to one tiny favor and found yourself, weeks later, committed to something far larger, wondering how you got there. You got there one small yes at a time. A protected mind learns to see the staircase for what it is, to notice when a series of small agreements is quietly leading somewhere you did not choose to go. You do not have to refuse every request or suspect every ask. You only have to stay aware that consistency is a force acting on you, that each yes makes the next one easier, and that you are allowed to stop at any step and reconsider the whole direction. Saying yes to something small does not obligate you to the large thing it was meant to lead to. You can always pause, look at where the staircase is heading, and simply decline to climb further. To see the small yes as the first step of a longer path is to keep your freedom to choose the destination, rather than being walked there one harmless seeming agreement at a time. The big ask before the real one. The big ask before the real one is a quiet technique that makes a large request feel reasonable simply because something larger came first. Someone asks for far more than they expect to get. You refuse, and then they offer a smaller request, the one they wanted all along. And now that smaller one feels like a fair compromise, you would feel rude to reject. Psychologists call this the door-in-the-face effect, and it works because the contrast reshapes your sense of what is reasonable, and because their apparent concession seems to call for one of your own. Think of a moment you turned down an outrageous request only to agree, with relief, to a lesser one you might otherwise have declined. The first ask was never serious. It was there to make the second look small. A protected mind learns to judge each request on its own merits, not against the inflated one placed beside it. You do not have to become suspicious of everyone who asks you for things. You only have to notice when a rejected large request is immediately followed by a smaller one, and to ask whether you would have agreed to that smaller thing on its own, without the contrast. The compromise you feel pressured to make may be exactly the outcome someone engineered. To evaluate what is actually being asked, free of the shadow of the bigger ask beside it, is to keep your judgment clear and your yes genuinely yours, given because you chose it, not because a larger number made it look like a bargain. The urgency that rushes you. The urgency that rushes you is one of the most reliable signs that someone wants your decision before your judgment can arrive. A protected mind treats manufactured haste as a warning. Real opportunities rarely require you to decide this very second, but pressure tactics manufacture a ticking clock, a limited time, a closing door, precisely because a rushed mind cannot think clearly and defaults to fear of missing out. Psychologists call this the scarcity principle, the way we value and grab at things that seem about to vanish. Think of a moment you made a poor choice under pressure, pushed to decide immediately, and how, given even a night to think, you would have chosen differently. The urgency was the trap. A protected mind learns that the feeling of must decide now is itself the signal to slow down, that anything genuinely good will survive you taking your time. You do not have to distrust every deadline or assume all urgency is false. Some things really are time-sensitive. You only have to notice when haste is being used to bypass your thinking, and to give yourself permission to step back, breathe, and let the pressure pass before deciding. A choice made in a rush belongs partly to whoever created the rush. A choice made in your own time belongs fully to you. When you feel the clock being pushed on you, the wisest move is almost always to slow down, because the mind protects itself best not by deciding faster, but by refusing to be hurried out of its own good judgment. The choice already made for you. The choice already made for you is the illusion of freedom laid over a decision that has quietly been shaped in advance. You feel you are choosing freely, but the options were arranged, the framing set, so that the desired answer feels like your own idea. Psychologists studying decision-making show that how a choice is presented, the order, the wording, the addition of a deliberately unattractive option, powerfully steers which one people pick without their ever noticing the hand on the wheel. Think of a menu of 3 prices where the middle one felt just right, never realizing the expensive option existed mainly to make the middle look reasonable. You chose, but the choice was engineered. A protected mind learns to look past the options offered and ask what is being left out. Who arranged these particular choices, and whether the decision that feels natural is the one someone wanted you to reach. You do not have to overanalyze every menu or distrust every set of options. You only have to remember that framing is invisible and powerful, that the way a choice is presented shapes it, and that you can always step back and ask what you actually want, apart from the options placed before you. The freedom to choose among arranged options is a smaller freedom than it feels. The larger freedom is to question the frame itself, to consider possibilities no one offered you. To see the shaping of a choice is to reclaim the deeper decision, and that is a quiet, powerful way the mind protects its own will. The guilt used as a lever. The guilt used as a lever is one of the most painful ways people are moved, because it turns your own conscience into a tool against you. Guilt is a healthy signal when it reflects a real wrong, but it can be manufactured, applied where no wrong exists, to make you comply out of a feeling you did nothing to earn. A protected mind learns to tell true guilt from installed guilt. Psychologists note that those skilled in influence often exploit the conscientious, because a person who fears having done wrong will do a great deal to relieve that feeling. Think of a time you agreed to something not because you wanted to, but because refusing was made to feel like a betrayal, a selfishness, a failure of love. That guilt was a lever, and you were being moved by it. A protected mind pauses when guilt arrives and asks whether it has actually done something wrong, or whether the guilt is being generated to steer it. You do not have to become guiltless or ignore your real conscience. Genuine guilt is a moral gift. You only have to distinguish it from the manufactured kind, the guilt that appears exactly when someone wants something from you, that punishes you for having needs or boundaries or a separate self. Saying no is not a crime, and protecting your own limits is not a betrayal, however skillfully someone frames it as one. To feel guilt and still ask whether it is deserved is to keep your conscience your own, rather than letting it become a handle by which others can turn you. The flattery before the ask. The flattery before the ask is a pattern worth noticing, because praise that arrives just before a request is often a key being fitted to a lock. Genuine appreciation is one of life's warmest gifts, but flattery used as a tool has a tell. It's timing. It comes right before someone wants something, aimed precisely at the part of you most likely to grant it. Psychologists find that we are powerfully inclined to like and comply with those who praise us, even when we suspect the praise is strategic. Think of a moment someone told you how uniquely capable, generous, or special you were, and how. Moments later, the request arrived, tailored to the very quality they had just admired. The praise was preparing the ground. A protected mind enjoys genuine appreciation while staying gently alert to praise that comes with a purpose attached. You do not have to reject all compliments or assume every kind word is a manipulation. Most praise is sincere, and refusing to receive it would be its own loss. You only have to notice the timing, to feel a soft caution when flattery arrives just before an ask, especially flattery aimed exactly at whatever the request requires of you. You can accept the compliment and still evaluate the request on its own terms, keeping the two separate. The warmth someone offers and the thing they want from you do not have to travel together. To receive praise gladly while judging requests clearly is to keep your heart open and your judgment intact, so that no one can unlock your compliance simply by admiring you at the right moment. The crowd that pulls you along. The crowd that pulls you along is one of the strongest forces acting on any human mind, because we are built to follow the group, often against our own better judgment. When everyone around us believes or does something, it takes real effort not to be carried with them, and this pull operates far below conscious choice. In a famous experiment, psychologist Solomon Asch showed that people would agree with an obviously wrong answer simply because a group of others had given it first, doubting their own clear eyes rather than stand apart. Think of a time you went along with something, a decision, an opinion, a purchase, mainly because everyone else was, and how much of your own judgment you quietly set aside to stay with the crowd. A protected mind learns to notice the pull of the group and to check its own perception separately, to ask what it would think if it were not being swept along. You do not have to reject everything popular or pride yourself on always standing apart. Sometimes the crowd is right, and belonging is a genuine human good. You only have to stay aware that consensus is a force, not a proof, that many people believing something does not make it true, and that your own clear perception is worth trusting even when it stands alone. The comfort of agreement can quietly cost you your judgment. To feel the crowd's pull and still consult your own eyes is to remain a free mind inside a social world, able to belong without dissolving, and to follow the group only when you have genuinely chosen to. The authority you forget to doubt. The authority you forget to doubt is a powerful influence precisely because obedience to it is trained into us so early and so deeply. We are taught from childhood to defer to those who seem to be in charge, and this instinct, useful in many settings, can be exploited by anyone who successfully appears authoritative, whether or not they deserve the trust. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's studies revealed how far ordinary people would go simply because someone in a position of authority instructed them to, overriding their own conscience out of deference. Think of a time you followed a confident, official-seeming voice against your own better sense, only to realize later that the authority was hollow, the confidence unearned. A protected mind respects genuine expertise while remembering that the appearance of authority, a title, a tone, a uniform of confidence, is not the same as the real thing. You do not have to reject all authority or distrust every expert, which would be its own kind of foolishness. Real knowledge deserves real respect. You only have to keep a small, healthy space for your own judgment, even in the presence of confidence, to ask whether this authority is genuine, whether its instruction actually makes sense, whether deferring serves you or only serves them. Confidence is easy to perform, and many who command it have not earned it. To respect true expertise while keeping the right to question is to protect yourself from those who wear authority as a costume and to remain, even before the powerful, a mind that still thinks for itself. The number that anchors you. The number that anchors you is a quiet distortion that shapes nearly every judgment of value you make, usually without your awareness. The first number you hear becomes a reference point, and everything after is measured against it, even when the first number was arbitrary or deliberately placed. Psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman named this the anchoring effect, and showed that even a random number, seen just before a decision, will pull people's estimates toward it. Think of a negotiation where the first figure named quietly set the whole range, so that a price you would have found outrageous in isolation felt reasonable once anchored to a higher one. The anchor did its work before you noticed. A protected mind learns that the first number is not a neutral fact, but a force, and that whoever names it first is shaping the field. You do not have to distrust all prices or treat every figure as a trap. You only have to remember that your sense of what something is worth can be moved by an anchor you never agreed to, and to ask what a thing is actually worth to you, apart from the number placed beside it. The starting figure is often chosen to steer you, not to inform you. To recognize the anchor is to loosen its grip, to judge value on your own terms, rather than in the shadow of whatever number happened to be spoken first. A mind aware of anchoring negotiates the world from firmer ground, harder to nudge, harder to overcharge, and freer to decide what things are truly worth. The fear that does the selling. The fear that does the selling is one of the oldest levers there is, because a frightened mind reaches for whatever promises safety without stopping to think. When someone wants to move you quickly, they often raise a fear first, a danger, a threat, a terrible thing that will happen unless you act, and then present their request as the escape. Researchers who study persuasion find that fear appeals work by flooding the mind with urgency, narrowing your options down to the one being offered. Think of a time you were frightened into a decision, a purchase, an agreement, a belief, and how the fear made the choice feel obvious. Until, calm again, you saw how much it had been driving you. A protected mind learns to notice when fear is being raised right before a solution is offered, and to treat that sequence as a signal to slow down rather than speed up. You do not have to dismiss all warnings or assume every danger is invented. Some fears are real and worth heeding. You only have to see when fear is being used to sell, when someone benefits from your alarm, when the terror and the cure are being offered by the same hand. A decision made in fear belongs partly to whoever created the fear. To feel the alarm rise and still pause, to ask whether the danger is real and whether this is truly the only escape, is to keep your judgment above your fear. And a mind that can stay steady while afraid is very difficult to move against its own interest. The sunk cost that keeps you in. The sunk cost that keeps you in is one of the most quietly costly traps the mind falls into, and escaping it can free years of a life. Once you have invested heavily in something, time, money, effort, love, it becomes agonizingly hard to walk away, even when walking away is clearly right, because leaving feels like admitting the investment was wasted. Economists and psychologists call this the sunk cost fallacy. The mistake of letting what you have already spent, and can never recover, dictate what you do next. Think of something you stayed in far too long, a job, a relationship, a plan, not because it was still right, but because you had already given it so much that quitting felt like losing everything. The past investment held you in place. A protected mind learns that what is already spent is gone regardless, and that the only real question is whether continuing serves you from here forward. You do not have to abandon everything hard or treat commitment as weakness. Perseverance is often a virtue. You only have to separate the past you cannot recover from the future you can still choose. To ask not how much you have already given, but whether the road ahead is worth walking. The years behind you are not a reason to waste the years in front of you. To let go of what is already lost and to decide the future on its own merits is one of the freeing acts of a protected mind, releasing you from a prison built entirely out of what you have already paid. The confusion that softens you. The confusion that softens you is a subtle tactic that works by overwhelming your thinking until you grasp at whatever feels like clarity. When a mind is flooded with too much information, contradictory claims, a tangle it cannot sort, it grows tired and suggestible and reaches gratefully for any simple answer offered. Those who study influence note that deliberate confusion can lower resistance because a bewildered mind, desperate for relief, will accept guidance it would otherwise have questioned. Think of a time you were talked in circles until you no longer knew which way was up and simply agreed to end the disorientation, relieved to have any solid ground. The confusion was not accidental. It was softening you. A protected mind learns to notice when it feels overwhelmed and foggy in someone's presence, and to treat that fog as a signal to stop and step back rather than to grab the nearest certainty. You do not have to understand everything instantly or distrust all complexity. Some things are genuinely complicated. You only have to recognize that a confused mind is a vulnerable one, and that you are allowed to pause, to say, I need time to think about this clearly, to refuse to decide from inside the fog. Clarity almost never requires haste. When you feel deliberately turned around, the protection is to stop the spin, to return to a few things you know for certain, and to decline any decision until your own thinking has come back. A mind that will not be rushed through confusion keeps its judgment even when someone is working to cloud it. The games you can now see. The games you can now see lose most of their power the moment you can name them, and that is what this tier has quietly given you. Every topic here has described a way people are moved. The small yes, the false urgency, the manufactured guilt, the anchor, the fear, and each one, once recognized, stops working in the dark. This is the crucial truth about influence, that it depends on invisibility, that these tactics function only while you cannot see them operating. The named game is a game you can decline to play. Researchers of persuasion often note that simply teaching people how a technique works reduces its effect, because awareness itself is a shield. Think of how differently you will feel now when urgency is pushed on you, when praise arrives just before an ask, when a first outrageous number tries to anchor the rest, seeing the shape of it, feeling the machinery. A protected mind does not become cold, suspicious, or closed, which would cost you the genuine warmth of ordinary life. It becomes clear, able to enjoy real connection while quietly recognizing when a game is afoot. You do not have to treat everyone as a manipulator or analyze every interaction. Most people are simply living their lives with no design on you at all. You only have to carry the quiet awareness these levels have built, so that when a game does appear, you see it, name it, and remain free. Rest tonight in knowing that the tactics which move so many people in the dark have been brought into your light, and that a mind which can see the game can never again be an unwitting piece in it. The no that needs no reason. The no that needs no reason is one of the first true defenses a mind can claim, because a boundary offered up with excuses is a boundary already half surrendered. When you decline something and immediately explain, justify, apologize, you hand the other person a list of objections to argue with, and a determined person will argue with every one. But no is a complete sentence. Psychologists who study assertiveness find that over-explaining a refusal signals that your no is negotiable, an opening bid rather than a decision. Think of a time you gave 3 careful reasons for saying no, only to watch each one dismantled until you found yourself agreeing to the very thing you had refused. The reasons were the weakness. A protected mind learns that it does not owe a reason for protecting its own time, energy, or peace, that no can stand alone, kind but immovable. You do not have to be harsh or cold. A warm, simple no is often the most respectful thing you can offer. You only have to release the belief that your boundary requires the other person's approval, that you must argue them into accepting your own limit. Some people will always find your reasons insufficient because they do not want reasons. They want compliance. To them, the only real answer is a no that does not open for debate. You are allowed to decline simply because you choose to, without building a case for it. To let your no be complete, needing no defense, is to hold a boundary that cannot be argued away. And that quiet, reasonless no is one of the most protective sentences a person can learn to say. The boundary that protects both. The boundary that protects both is a truth that transforms how boundaries feel. Because a limit is not an act of aggression, but an act of care for you and for the relationship. Many people avoid boundaries out of fear that they are cruel, that saying no or defining a limit will damage the connection. But the opposite is usually true. Psychologists who study healthy relationships find that clear boundaries reduce resentment and build trust because they let people know where they truly stand. Think of a relationship that curdled slowly because you kept saying yes past your limit until quiet resentment poisoned the very closeness you were trying to protect. The missing boundary damaged you both. A protected mind learns that a boundary honestly held is a gift to everyone involved, that it prevents the slow rot of resentment and lets a relationship rest on truth rather than on your quiet self-erasure. You do not have to feel guilty for having limits or believe that love means having none. You only have to understand that the boundary protecting you also protects the connection, because a version of you that is depleted, resentful, and slowly disappearing has nothing good to offer anyone. The people who truly care for you want to know your real limits, so they are not accidentally taking more than you can give. A boundary is not a wall against love. It is the shape that makes love sustainable. To hold your limits clearly is to protect both yourself and the very relationships you feared a boundary would harm. The space you are allowed to take. The space you are allowed to take is a permission many people never received, and reclaiming it is a quiet, powerful defense. Somewhere, some of us learn to be small, to apologize for our presence, to shrink our needs, our voices, our very bodies, so as not to be a burden. And that smallness, once a survival strategy, becomes a lifelong habit of self-erasure. Psychologists note that chronic self-minimizing is linked to depletion and to being repeatedly overlooked, because the world tends to give people roughly the space they claim. Think of how often you have made yourself smaller in a room, held back an opinion, taken the lesser portion, said you did not mind when you did, and how invisible that smallness left you. A protected mind learns that it is allowed to take up space, to have needs and voice them, to exist fully rather than apologetically. You do not have to become loud, demanding, or self-centered, which is a different distortion. You only have to grant yourself the ordinary human right to be here, to matter, to occupy your own life without apology. The space you take is not stolen from anyone. There is room for you. The habit of shrinking was learned in a place where your fullness felt unsafe, and it is no longer needed. To let yourself take up the space that is rightfully yours, to stop apologizing for your own existence, is to end a quiet war against yourself. And a mind no longer at war with its own presence is far harder to overlook, diminish, or push aside. The guilt you can feel and ignore. The guilt you can feel and ignore is a distinction that frees people who are ruled by conscience, because not all guilt is a signal worth obeying. Guilt is meant to alert you when you have wronged someone, and that guilt deserves attention. But there is another guilt, the false alarm that fires whenever you put yourself first, set a boundary, or disappoint someone who wanted more from you. That guilt is not moral information. It is old conditioning. Psychologists working with people-pleasers describe this misfiring guilt, installed early, that punishes any act of self-protection as though it were a crime. Think of the wave of guilt that hits you after saying no to something reasonable to refuse, a guilt so strong it nearly makes you reverse yourself. That guilt is not truth. It is a reflex. A protected mind learns to feel this guilt without obeying it, to say, I notice I feel guilty, and I have done nothing wrong. You do not have to silence your conscience or become indifferent to others. Real guilt over real harm remains a moral gift. You only have to learn to tell the two apart, to recognize the hollow guilt that arrives whenever you protect yourself, and to let it pass through without acting on it. A feeling is not a command. You can feel guilty for having a boundary and keep the boundary anyway. And each time you do, the false guilt weakens a little. To feel the pull of manufactured guilt and decline to be moved by it is to reclaim your right to a self. And that reclaiming is one of the deepest defenses a conscientious mind can build. The approval you stop chasing. The approval you stop chasing is a chain that falls away the moment you set it down, and its loss is pure freedom. For many people, the need for others' approval is a quiet governor on every choice, shaping what they say, wear, pursue, and become, all in pursuit of a nod that never fully satisfies. Psychologists link this to a self-worth built on external validation, a foundation that must be constantly refilled from outside and can never hold on its own. Think of how many decisions in your life were quietly aimed at approval, at not disappointing, at being liked, and how the approval, when it came, soothed you only briefly before the hunger returned. A protected mind learns that the endless pursuit of approval is a race with no finish, and that the only stable ground is a sense of worth that comes from within. You do not have to stop caring about others entirely or become indifferent to all opinion. Some feedback is valuable, and connection matters. You only have to stop outsourcing your worth, to stop letting the fluctuating approval of others determine how you feel about yourself. When you no longer need everyone to like you, a strange calm arrives, because the thing people could use to control you, their approval and disapproval, loses its grip. You become harder to manipulate and easier to live inside, no longer performing for an audience whose applause you can never fully earn. To root your worth within yourself, beyond the reach of others' opinions, is to become free in a way that no external approval could ever provide. The distance that keeps you whole. The distance that keeps you whole is a defense that many mistake for coldness, when it is actually wisdom. Because not everyone has earned a place close to your center. We are taught that openness is always good, that walls are bad, that we should let everyone in. But a mind with no sense of distance is a mind exposed to everyone equally, drained by every demand, wounded by every unkind person granted full access. Psychologists who study emotional regulation note the importance of choosing carefully who gets close, of matching intimacy to trustworthiness rather than offering it indiscriminately. Think of a time you let someone deep into your inner life who had not earned it, and the damage they did with the access you freely gave. A protected mind learns to hold a natural, healthy distance, letting people earn closeness over time rather than granting it instantly to all. You do not have to become guarded or cold, closing yourself to genuine connection, which would be its own impoverishment. You only have to understand that intimacy is precious and should be matched to trust, that some people belong at the edges of your life and some in the center, and that you get to decide which. Distance is not rejection. It is discernment. The people who have shown themselves safe deserve your depth. Those who have not can be met with warmth and still held at a measured distance. To calibrate closeness to trustworthiness, rather than flinging every door open, is to protect the tender center of yourself while remaining genuinely, selectively, open to the connections that have proven worthy of it. The response you get to choose. The response you get to choose is the deepest freedom a human being holds, the small but total power that lies between what happens and what you do. Much of life is not up to you, but the response always is, and in that space lives your entire dignity. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived the darkest of human conditions, wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, And in that space is our power and our freedom. Think of a moment someone tried to provoke you, to bait you into anger or panic, and how, if you could find even a sliver of that space, you could choose a response rather than simply reacting. Whoever controls your reaction controls you, and a protected mind learns to keep that control for itself. You do not have to suppress your feelings or become unnaturally calm. You only have to remember that between what is done to you and what you do next lies a space that belongs entirely to you, that no one can enter without your permission. People will try to push your buttons, but the buttons only work if you let the reaction be automatic. When you claim the space to choose, the provocations lose their power, because the reaction they were designed to trigger no longer fires on command. This is the ultimate defense, the one thing that cannot be taken from you even in the worst circumstances, the freedom to choose your own response. To guard that space and to choose from it rather than react from habit is to remain, always, the author of your own conduct. The anger that guards your line. The anger that guards your line is a defense that many well-meaning people have disowned, and reclaiming it, wisely, restores a vital protection. Anger has a bad reputation, and its destructive forms deserve caution. But anger also has a healthy function, a signal that a boundary has been crossed, a line violated, a wrong done to you or someone you care about. A person who has buried all their anger has lost their alarm system and cannot feel when they are being mistreated. Psychologists distinguish this clean, protective anger from destructive rage, and note that people who cannot access any anger are often taken advantage of, unable to register or resist violation. Think of a time you felt a flare of anger at being disrespected and talked yourself out of it, only to be walked over again and again. The anger had been correct. A protected mind learns to listen to its anger as information, to feel the flare that says, "This is not acceptable," without being ruled by it or turning it into cruelty. You do not have to become an angry person or let rage govern you. You only have to stop disowning the healthy anger that guards your dignity, to let it inform you when a line has been crossed, and to act on that information with calm firmness. Anger, held well, is not the opposite of peace. It is one of its guardians. To reclaim your capacity for clean, protective anger, feeling it clearly and using it wisely, is to restore an inner alarm that keeps you from being quietly, repeatedly, violated by those who count on your inability to object. The peace you refuse to trade. The peace you refuse to trade is a defense built on knowing the true value of your own inner calm, so that you stop bartering it away cheaply. Every day, the world offers to buy your peace with a pointless argument, an outrage to absorb, a provocation to answer, a worry to adopt, and most people sell it constantly for nothing. A protected mind learns to treat its own tranquility as something precious, not to be handed over to every person or situation that reaches for it. The Stoics taught that no one can disturb your peace without your consent, that the disturbance is something you agree to, often without noticing. Think of how often you have surrendered a whole evening's calm to a stranger's rudeness, a piece of news, an argument you did not need to have, and how little you gained in exchange. A protected mind asks, before trading its peace, whether the thing is worth what it costs. You do not have to become detached from everything or stop caring about the world. Some things are worth your disturbance. You only have to stop giving your calm away for free to every small provocation, every bait, every unimportant conflict. Your peace is not infinite, and it is not owed to whoever demands it. To guard it, to refuse to trade it for things that do not deserve it, is not coldness, but wisdom. When you stop selling your tranquility so cheaply, you find you have far more of it, and a mind that keeps its own peace is one that others find remarkably difficult to disturb. The person you do not explain to. The person you do not explain to is a hard-won piece of wisdom. The recognition that some people are not asking questions in order to understand you, and that explaining yourself to them is a trap. There are people who will never accept your reasons, not because your reasons are poor, but because their goal was never understanding. They ask why so they can argue, dismiss, or wear you down. Psychologists describe this dynamic in difficult relationships, where the request for explanation is really a demand for compliance in disguise. Think of the exhaustion of justifying yourself again and again to someone who twisted every answer, who is never going to be satisfied, whose questions were weapons. A protected mind learns to recognize these people and to stop feeding the machine, to hold its position without endless justification. You do not have to explain your every choice to those who have shown they will only use your explanations against you. You do not owe a defense to someone conducting a prosecution. You only have to see the difference between a genuine question and a hostile one, between someone seeking understanding and someone seeking control. With the first, explanation is a gift. With the second, it is fuel. To some people, you can simply say, "This is my decision," and decline to argue further, because their acceptance was never on offer. Withholding your explanation from those who would only weaponize it is not rudeness, but self-protection. To know who deserves your reasons and who does not is to stop pouring your energy into a debate you were never meant to win. The exit you always keep. The exit you always keep is a quiet source of strength, the knowledge that you are rarely as trapped as you feel, and that the ability to leave changes everything about how you stand. Much of the power others hold over us comes from the belief that we cannot walk away from a job, a relationship, a situation, a conversation. But that belief is often false, and a mind that knows it can leave negotiates the world from a position of freedom rather than fear. Psychologists note that a sense of having options, even unused ones, dramatically reduces the stress of a difficult situation. Think of how differently you behave when you feel cornered versus when you know you could walk out the door, how the mere awareness of an exit steadies you. A protected mind keeps this awareness alive, remembering that it is a free person who is choosing to stay, not a prisoner who has to. You do not have to actually leave everything or treat every difficulty as a reason to flee. Staying is often right, and commitment is valuable. You only have to hold, quietly, the knowledge that you could go, because that knowledge transforms staying from a trap into a choice. A person who believes they cannot leave will tolerate almost anything. A person who knows they can leave tolerates only what is worth staying for. To keep your exit always in view, even when you have no intention of using it, is to stand in every situation as a free agent, and freedom is the ground on which all other defenses rest. The yes you save for what matters. The yes you save for what matters is the other half of a strong no, the understanding that every yes you give to the wrong thing is stolen from the right one. Your time, energy, and attention are finite, and each time you say yes to something out of pressure, guilt, or habit, you have less to give to what you actually care about. A protected mind learns that saying no to the unimportant is how you protect your yes for the important. Researchers of attention and energy find that the most fulfilled people are not those who do the most, but those who are most deliberate about what they decline. Think of how much of your life has been consumed by obligations you never truly chose, leaving too little for the people and pursuits that actually mattered to you. Every unnecessary yes was a small theft. A protected mind guards its yes as carefully as its no, spending it consciously, on purpose, where it counts. You do not have to refuse everything or become unavailable. You only have to recognize that yes is a limited resource, and that giving it away carelessly leaves you empty for what deserves it most. When you protect your yes, you are not being selfish. You are ensuring that the things you love actually receive you, rather than the exhausted remainder left after 100 obligations you never wanted. To save your yes for what matters, and to let your no protect it, is to build a life shaped by your own priorities, rather than by everyone else's requests. The walls that have doors. The walls that have doors are the balance this whole tier has been building. The understanding that real protection is not a fortress sealed shut, but a boundary that can open and close by your own choice. A mind with no defenses is overrun, but a mind walled off entirely is imprisoned, cut off from the connection and love that make a protected life worth living. The goal was never to keep everyone out. It was to become the one who decides who comes in. Psychologists studying healthy attachment describe exactly this: a security that allows both firm boundaries and deep closeness, walls with doors you control. Think of the difference between a person so open they are constantly wounded and a person so closed they are utterly alone, and how neither is truly safe. A protected mind lives between them, able to say a firm no and a wholehearted yes, to hold a boundary, and to lower it for those who have earned trust. You do not have to choose between being defenseless and being isolated. That is a false choice. You only have to build walls with doors, defenses you control, so that you can be open without being exposed, and safe without being alone. The strength of these defenses is not that they keep everyone out, but that they put you in charge of the threshold. Rest tonight in knowing that you are building not a prison and not an open field, but a home, with walls that protect you, and doors that you, and only you, decide when to open. The reality they slowly rewrite. The reality they slowly rewrite is one of the most disorienting patterns a person can encounter, because it makes you doubt your own mind. It happens when someone repeatedly denies what you clearly remember, insists events did not happen the way you experienced them, tells you that you are too sensitive, imagining things, misremembering, until you begin to distrust your own perception. This has a name: gaslighting, and psychologists describe it as a slow erosion of a person's confidence in their own reality. Think of a moment you were certain of something you saw or heard, only to be told so firmly and so often that you were wrong, that you eventually wondered whether you could trust yourself at all. That doubt was the goal. A protected mind learns to notice this pattern, to hold on to its own memory, even when someone insists on rewriting it. You do not have to win the argument or prove what happened. You only have to keep a quiet, private trust in your own perception, perhaps by noticing when a relationship consistently leaves you confused and doubting yourself. That confusion is itself information. Your memory is not perfect, but it is not nothing. And a pattern of someone systematically overwriting your reality is a pattern worth seeing clearly. When you find yourself constantly questioning your own mind around a particular person, the protection is to step back and reconnect with what you know to be true, and to trust that your perception, however much it is denied, is your own to keep. A mind that holds on to its own reality cannot be slowly rewritten by anyone. The blame that never lands. The blame that never lands on a certain person is a pattern that reveals a great deal, because a mature human being can, at least sometimes, admit fault. When someone is never wrong, never sorry in a way that changes anything, always able to twist any situation until you are somehow the one apologizing. You are watching a defense against responsibility so complete that accountability never touches them. Psychologists sometimes describe a maneuver where the person who caused harm reverses the roles, becoming the offended party, so that the one who is wronged ends up defending themselves. Think of a time you approached someone with a legitimate hurt and walked away apologizing to them, unsure how the conversation had flipped so completely. That reversal was the pattern. A protected mind learns to notice when blame can never find its target, when a person is structurally incapable of holding any fault. You do not have to force an admission or prove your case, which with such a person is usually impossible. You only have to see the pattern clearly, to recognize that when someone never once takes responsibility, the problem is not that you keep failing to explain yourself well enough. The problem is a defense you cannot argue past. Noticing this protects you from the exhausting, endless effort of trying to make an unaccountable person accountable. Some people will never say they were wrong, and understanding that spares you from spending your life trying to reach an admission that will not come. To see the blame that never lands is to stop chasing it and to keep your own clear sense of what actually happened. The charm that hides the chill. The charm that hides the chill is a pattern worth understanding, because the most difficult people are often, at first, the most charming. Genuine warmth and surface charm can look identical for a while, but they come from different places, and over time, the difference shows. Some charm is a tool, a polished surface with something cold beneath it, deployed to win you before the coldness appears. Psychologists studying manipulative personality patterns note that superficial charm often masks a striking lack of genuine empathy. Think of someone who dazzled you completely at first, only for a chill to emerge later, a coldness in their eyes during your pain, a warmth that ran only skin deep. The charm had been real as a performance and hollow as a feeling. A protected mind learns not to be won by charm alone, to watch instead for warmth that holds up under pressure, that shows itself in how someone treats you when you are struggling, weak, or of no use to them. You do not have to distrust charming people, most of whom are simply pleasant. You only have to let charm prove itself over time, to notice whether the warmth reaches the eyes, whether it survives your bad days, whether there is real empathy behind the polish. Charm is easy to perform. Genuine care is not. To watch for the chill beneath a charming surface, without assuming it is always there, is to protect yourself from being swept away by a performance, while remaining open to the many people whose warmth goes all the way down. Time reveals what charm conceals, and a patient mind lets it. The victim who is always wronged. The victim who is always wronged is a pattern that can be hard to see, because genuine victims deserve compassion, and this pattern hides inside that truth. Some people occupy the role of the perpetually wronged, always the one who is mistreated, never the one who caused harm, using their apparent suffering to avoid all accountability and to control those around them through guilt and obligation. Psychologists describe how a permanent victim stance can become a strategy, a way to secure sympathy while remaining beyond criticism. Think of someone whose every story cast them as the innocent injured party, whose problems were always others' fault, and how their suffering, real or performed, was somehow always a claim on you. A protected mind learns to hold compassion and discernment together, to care about genuine pain, while noticing when victimhood has become a permanent, unfalsifiable position used to escape responsibility. You do not have to become cold to real suffering, which would harden you in a terrible way. Most people who are hurting are simply hurting. You only have to notice the difference between someone moving through pain toward healing and someone who has settled permanently into being wronged as a way of life, immune to any accountability. When every conflict somehow ends with you comforting the person who hurt you, a pattern may be at work. To see this clearly is not to lack compassion. It is to keep your compassion from being used as a leash, and to reserve your deepest care for those whose pain does not come with a hidden bill attached. The words that never match the acts. The words that never match the acts are one of the clearest signals in all of human behavior, and learning to weight actions over words protects you from a specific and lasting pain. Some people speak beautifully, promise sincerely, describe themselves in glowing terms, and behave in ways that consistently contradict every word. The gap between what they say and what they do is not occasional but constant, and the words are always more impressive than the deeds. Behavioral psychology is clear that actions predict future actions far better than statements ever do. Think of someone who told you exactly what you longed to hear, again and again, while their behavior told a completely different and unchanging story, and how long you believe the words over the evidence. A protected mind learns to watch the gap, to let repeated behavior outweigh even the most moving declarations. You do not have to dismiss everyone's words or assume all promises are empty. Many people say what they mean and do it. You only have to notice when there is a persistent, reliable gap between someone's words and their actions, and to trust the actions. Words cost nothing and can be crafted to please. Behavior, repeated over time, is the truth of a person. When you find yourself explaining away someone's actions because their words were so convincing, that is the moment to look again. To believe what people do, more than what they say, is to protect yourself from investing your trust in a story that the person's own conduct keeps quietly disproving. The silence used to punish you. The silence used to punish you is a pattern that turns absence into a weapon, and recognizing it frees you from a particularly confusing kind of control. There is a difference between someone needing space, which is healthy, and someone withdrawing all connection to punish you, to make you anxious, to force compliance through the pain of being shut out. This deliberate withholding, sometimes called stonewalling, refuses engagement precisely to distress you. And it works because being cut off from connection is genuinely painful to the human nervous system. Think of a time someone went cold and silent, not to calm down, but to make you suffer until you surrendered, and how the silence pulled you into anxious apology for a crime you could not name. A protected mind learns to tell the difference between a healthy pause and a punishing silence, and to refuse to be trained by the latter. You do not have to deny anyone's space or treat every quiet moment as an attack. Real space is a legitimate need. You only have to recognize when silence is being used as a punishment, a way to control you through the pain of withdrawal, and to stop rewarding it with frantic appeasement. When someone repeatedly withdraws connection to bend you to their will, the protection is to stay steady, to resist the panic that pushes you to surrender, and to see the pattern for what it is. Silence, used as a weapon, only controls you while you race to end it on any terms. A mind that can tolerate the discomfort without capitulating cannot be ruled by the cold shoulder. The slow pull from everyone else. The slow pull from everyone else is one of the most serious patterns to recognize, because our connections to others are among our greatest protections, and someone who quietly erodes them is removing your safety. It rarely happens all at once. It is gradual, a subtle criticism of your friends, a reason each time not to see your family, a slow narrowing of your world until the person becomes your only source of connection and reality. Those who study unhealthy relationships identify isolation as a common thread because a person cut off from outside support is far easier to control. Think of how a world can shrink slowly, each withdrawal seeming reasonable on its own, until one day you notice how few people are left, how alone you have quietly become. A protected mind learns to guard its connections, to notice if a relationship is steadily pulling it away from everyone else. You do not have to distrust every partner who wants time with you, which is a normal part of closeness. You only have to watch the overall direction, to notice if your world is narrowing, if your other relationships are quietly falling away around one person. Your friends, your family, your outside connections are not threats to a healthy relationship. They are part of what keeps you whole and safe. When you feel your world contracting around a single person, the protection is to deliberately maintain your other bonds, to keep your life wide. A mind connected to many people is far harder to control than one left with only one, and those connections are worth protecting. The hot and cold that hooks you. The hot and cold that hooks you is one of the most powerful patterns for creating attachment, and understanding it explains why unpredictable relationships can feel so impossibly hard to leave. When warmth and coldness alternate unpredictably, when you never know which version of someone you will get, the uncertainty itself becomes addictive. Behavioral science calls this intermittent reinforcement, and it is the same mechanism that makes gambling so compelling. An unpredictable reward that the mind chases far harder than a steady one. Think of a relationship where wonderful moments alternated with painful ones, and how the very unpredictability kept you hooked, always hoping for the return of the warmth, always working to earn it back. That pattern was not love deepening. It was a hook setting. A protected mind learns to recognize that a relationship of extreme highs and lows is not a sign of great passion, but often a sign of this destabilizing cycle, and that the intensity you feel may be the pull of the mechanism rather than the depth of the bond. You do not have to distrust all passion or fear every difficult patch. You only have to notice when the pattern is a relentless, unpredictable alternation of warmth and withdrawal that leaves you anxious and hooked. Steady, reliable warmth can feel less thrilling than the roller coaster, precisely because it is not activating the addictive mechanism. To recognize the hot and cold for what it is, and to value consistency over intensity, is to protect yourself from mistaking a hook for a heart, and to choose the kind of love that feels calm rather than the kind that feels like withdrawal. The apology that changes nothing. The apology that changes nothing is a pattern that keeps people trapped in cycles because it offers the words of repair while carefully avoiding the substance. A real apology includes changed behavior. The apology that changes nothing is complete in itself. A smooth performance of remorse followed by the exact same action again and again, so that the apology becomes simply one phase of a repeating cycle. Psychologists describe this cycle in troubled relationships, where the apology functions to reset the pattern, not to end it. Think of someone who apologized with real-seeming tears, promised it would never happen again, and did the same thing within weeks, and how the very sincerity of the apology kept you believing each time. The words were genuine, and the change never came. A protected mind learns to wait the change, not the apology, to watch what happens after the sorry, rather than being soothed by the sorry itself. You do not have to refuse all apologies or assume every remorse is fake. Many apologies are real and are followed by genuine change. You only have to notice when apology and repetition form a stable, endless cycle, when the words of repair are never matched by actual repair. An apology is a beginning, not an ending, and its truth is proven only by what follows. When you find yourself accepting the same apology for the same behavior over and over, the pattern, not the person's words, is telling you the truth. To watch for changed action rather than settling for remorse is to step out of the cycle that a hollow apology is designed to keep you in. The line that keeps moving. The line that keeps moving is an exhausting pattern that guarantees you can never succeed, because every time you meet the standard changes. You do what was asked, reach the goal that was set, satisfy the requirement, and immediately a new one appears, so that approval, acceptance, or peace is always just one more step away and never actually arrives. Psychologists call this shifting the goalposts, and it keeps a person perpetually striving and perpetually falling short. Think of a relationship or a job where you kept trying to be enough, meeting each demand only to find the bar raised again, and how you slowly concluded the failure must be yours. It was not. The line was designed to move. A protected mind learns to recognize when a goal is structurally unreachable, when meeting the standard only produces a new one, and to stop running a race that was built to have no finish. You do not have to abandon all effort or refuse every reasonable expectation. Standards can be legitimate. You only have to notice when no achievement is ever enough, when the target moves each time you reach it, because that pattern is not about your inadequacy, but about keeping you endlessly trying. When you realize you can never satisfy someone no matter what you do, the protection is to stop trying to satisfy them and to define enough for yourself. Your worth was never meant to depend on reaching a line that retreats every time you approach it. To see the moving line is to step off the treadmill and to measure yourself by a standard that actually holds still. The flaw they see only in you. The flaw they see only in you is a pattern that can quietly distort your self-image, and recognizing it restores your clarity. Sometimes a person accuses you, repeatedly and intensely, of the very thing they themselves do, criticizing you for coldness while being cold, for selfishness while being selfish, for dishonesty while deceiving you. Psychologists call this projection, an unconscious defense in which a person disowns an uncomfortable trait in themselves and sees it magnified in someone else. Think of a time you were accused, again and again, of a fault that felt foreign to you, only to realize with a jolt that the accusation described the accuser far more accurately than it described you. The criticism had been a mirror facing the wrong way. A protected mind learns to hold accusations up to reality rather than simply absorbing them, to ask whether a repeated criticism actually fits, or whether it fits the person making it. You do not have to reject all feedback, some of which is true and valuable, or assume every criticism is projection. You only have to notice when an accusation does not match your honest self-knowledge, especially when it uncannily describes the accuser. Being criticized does not make the criticism true. When someone insistently sees in you a flaw that seems to belong far more to them, the protection is to trust your own honest self-assessment over their projection and to refuse to reshape your self-image around a fault that was never yours. A mind that checks accusations against reality cannot be redefined by someone else's disowned shadow. The comparison meant to wound. The comparison meant to wound is a pattern that uses other people as instruments against you, and recognizing it protects your sense of security. Some people habitually compare you, unfavorably, to others, to an ex, a sibling, a colleague, a friend, not to help you grow, but to keep you insecure, off balance, and working to compete for their approval. Bringing a third person into the dynamic this way, sometimes called triangulation, creates jealousy and rivalry that keep you focused on earning a place you should never have had to earn. Think of a time someone praised another person specifically to make you feel lacking, to spark a quiet competition, and how it left you striving anxiously for a validation that was deliberately kept out of reach. The comparison was not information. It was a lever. A protected mind learns to recognize when comparison is being used as a weapon, to create insecurity rather than to offer honest perspective. You do not have to fear all comparison or refuse every mention of other people. Some comparisons are innocent or even useful. You only have to notice when comparison is aimed to wound, to keep you competing and unsettled, and to decline the contest. Your worth does not depend on ranking above whoever you are being measured against. When someone uses other people to make you feel not enough, the protection is to step out of the manufactured competition and to remember that a person who truly values you does not need to keep you insecure. To refuse the wounding comparison is to keep your footing and to stop auditioning for a place that should have been freely yours. The patterns you now recognize. The patterns you now recognize lose much of their power the moment you can name them. And that is the quiet gift this tier has given you. Every pattern here, the rewritten reality, the blame that never lands, the hot and cold, the moving line, works best in the dark on someone who cannot yet see the shape of it. Named, they become far easier to withstand. Researchers of unhealthy relationships often find that simply understanding these dynamics is itself protective. Because recognition breaks the spell of self-doubt these patterns depend on. And here is the most important and most reassuring truth of all. The vast majority of people you will ever meet do none of this. Most people are simply living their lives, flawed and kind and doing their best, with no design on you whatsoever. These patterns are the exception, not the rule, and the point of learning them is not to become suspicious of everyone, which would poison every good relationship you have. Think of how much steadier you will feel now, able to trust the many good people fully, while recognizing, early and clearly, the rare pattern that means you harm. A protected mind holds both, warmth toward the many and clear sight for the few. You do not have to walk through the world braced for betrayal. You only have to trust yourself to know that if something feels consistently confusing, diminishing, or wrong, that feeling is worth listening to. Rest tonight in this, that you can be open and warm and still safe, because you have learned to see clearly, and a mind that trusts its own perception can never again be quietly convinced that harm is love. The fortress no one can enter. The fortress no one can enter is the discovery, made by philosophers across many ages, that there is a place inside you that no external force can reach without your consent. The world can take your possessions, your comfort, your circumstances, even your body. But there is an inner citadel, your judgments, your responses, your character, that remains yours as long as you choose to hold it. The emperor and philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events, and that realizing this is the source of great strength. Think of a time everything around you fell apart, and how, in the wreckage, there was still a part of you that could choose how to meet it, a small, unconquered ground. That ground is the fortress. A protected mind learns to retreat there, to remember that whatever happens outside, the inner keep is defensible, that no one can make you abandon your own values or dignity without your agreement. You do not have to control the world, which was never possible, or pretend nothing can hurt you, which is not true. You only have to know that the deepest part of you, the part that judges and chooses and endures, cannot be entered against your will. This is the foundation of every strength in this final tier. When the world presses hardest, the protection is to withdraw into this inner fortress and to find it, as the wise have always found it, still standing. Rest tonight in knowing that this place exists in you, quiet and unconquered, and that it has been yours all along. The insult you choose not to take. The insult you choose not to take is a piece of ancient wisdom that hands you back your power in any confrontation, because an insult only wounds if you accept it. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that it is not the person who insults you who harms you, but your own judgment that their words are harmful. The words themselves are only sounds. It is you who grants them the power to sting, and what you grant, you can also withhold. Think of a time someone tried to insult you and, for whatever reason, it simply did not land. How you saw the attempt clearly and felt no wound, and how strange and free that was. The insult was offered, and you did not take it. A protected mind learns to receive an insult as a thing being handed to it, which it may accept or decline, remembering that another person's opinion of you is not a fact about you. You do not have to become numb or pretend words never affect you. You only have to remember, in the moment, that the sting is something you add, and that you can choose not to add it. When someone offers you an insult, you can simply leave it with them, unaccepted, like a gift you decline to open. Their words reveal their state, not your worth. To let insults pass without taking them into yourself is to become remarkably difficult to wound, and a mind that does not pick up every offered injury walks through the world far lighter and far freer than one that accepts them all. The opinion that cannot touch you. The opinion that cannot touch you is a freedom that arrives when you truly understand that other people's views of you exist entirely in their minds, not in yours. So much suffering comes from the imagined judgments of others, from living as though their opinions were a kind of weather that could actually harm us. But an opinion is only a thought in someone else's head, and it changes nothing about who you actually are. The Stoics observed that we are disturbed not by things, but by our opinions about them, and that this is true of others' opinions of us as well. Think of how much energy you have spent worrying about what someone thought of you, and how their opinion, whatever it was, never once altered your real nature, your actual worth, the truth of who you are. A protected mind learns to hold others' opinions loosely, to consider useful feedback while refusing to let the shifting views of others determine its sense of self. You do not have to stop caring about everyone, or become indifferent to all feedback. Some views are worth hearing. You only have to release the belief that your worth rises and falls with the opinions of others, that you must manage what everyone thinks of you. People will think what they think, shaped by their own moods and histories and limitations, and almost none of it is really about you. To let opinions remain where they live, in other minds, and to keep your sense of self anchored within, is to become free of a burden most people carry their whole lives, the exhausting weight of an audience whose judgments were never yours to control. The loss you rehearse in advance. The loss you rehearse in advance is an ancient practice that, done gently, deepens gratitude and softens fear rather than causing dread. The Stoics practiced what they called the premeditation of adversity, quietly contemplating that the things and people we love are impermanent, not to torment themselves, but to hold their blessings more preciously and to be less shattered when loss inevitably comes. This is not morbid worry. It is a deliberate remembering that nothing lasts which paradoxically makes the present more vivid. Think of how a thing you take for granted suddenly becomes precious the moment you imagine losing it. How the ordinary becomes a gift when you remember it is temporary. A protected mind learns to hold its blessings with open hands, aware of their impermanence, which makes them dearer now and their eventual loss more bearable. You do not have to dwell on loss or let the thought of it darken your days. You only have to let a quiet awareness of impermanence deepen your appreciation of what you have while you have it, and to prepare your heart gently for the truth that all things pass. The person you love, the comfort you enjoy, this very night, all of it is temporary, and that is precisely what makes it valuable. To remember this softly, without fear, is to love more fully and to grieve when the time comes with less devastation. A mind that has made peace with impermanence holds life more tenderly and loses it more gracefully, protected from the shock of a truth it has already, quietly, accepted. The desire you no longer obey. The desire you no longer obey is a freedom that comes from realizing you can feel a craving without being commanded by it. Much of our suffering comes from desires that rule us, the endless wanting of more, of what others have, of what we do not need, a restless craving that no acquisition ever fully satisfies. The Stoics and many wisdom traditions taught that freedom lies not in getting everything you want, but in wanting less, in loosening the grip of desire itself. Think of something you were sure you needed to be happy, and how, once you had it, the satisfaction faded and a new desire took its place, the wanting simply relocating. A protected mind learns to notice its desires without automatically obeying them, to feel a craving arise and to ask whether it truly serves you, rather than chasing it by reflex. You do not have to renounce all wanting or live without pleasure, which is a joyless extreme. You only have to stop being ruled by desire, to create a space between feeling a want and acting on it, to recognize that you can experience a craving and choose not to follow it. A person driven by endless desire can always be controlled through what they want. A person who has loosened that grip is far harder to move and far more content. To feel your desires without being enslaved by them is to find a deep and stable peace that no amount of acquisition could provide, the freedom of a mind that wants, but is not ruled by its wanting. The praise you hold lightly. The praise you hold lightly is the quiet twin of the insult you refuse to take, because if others' criticism cannot define you, neither can their applause. It feels wonderful to be praised, and there is nothing wrong with enjoying it. But a mind that depends on praise has handed its stability to others, rising with every compliment and falling with every silence. And such a mind can always be steered by whoever controls the applause. The Stoics warned against being ruled by the desire for a good reputation, noting that a self built on praise is built on the shifting opinions of others. Think of how a single compliment could lift your whole day and its absence could deflate you, and how much power that gave to the people around you. A protected mind learns to receive praise graciously while holding it lightly, to enjoy it without needing it, to keep its sense of worth anchored within rather than in the reactions of others. You do not have to reject compliments or pretend praise means nothing. You only have to stop depending on it, to let your stability come from your own values and conduct rather than from the approval of the crowd. When you no longer need praise, you become free, because the applause that could lift you can no longer be used to lead you. To hold praise lightly, enjoying it without being ruled by it, is to keep your center in your own hands, steady, whether the world is clapping or silent, which is a freedom that no external validation could ever match. The present that is always enough. The present that is always enough is a refuge that is available in every moment, because the present is the only place where life actually happens, and it is almost always more bearable than the mind's stories about past and future. Anxiety lives in an imagined future, and regret lives in a remembered past. But this moment, right now, is usually manageable, often peaceful, sometimes even good. The Stoics and the contemplative traditions alike pointed to the present as the only ground we truly possess. Think of how, in a moment of pure presence, watching something beautiful, absorbed in a task, simply breathing, the anxieties and regrets fell silent, and there was only now, and now was enough. A protected mind learns to return, again and again, to the present, to notice when it has wandered into a frightening future or a painful past, and to come home to the one moment that is real. You do not have to stop planning or reflecting, which have their place. You only have to remember that you can always return to now, that the present moment is a shelter from the mind's time-traveling suffering. This breath, this body, this quiet room. Right now, in this moment, you are almost certainly safe, and the terrors of the mind belong to times that are not here. To return to the present is to step out of imagined suffering and into actual life, which is nearly always steadier than the stories about it. A mind at home in the present has found a refuge that can never be taken away, because now is always, faithfully, here. The death that sharpens your life. The death that sharpens your life is perhaps the deepest of the ancient practices, the remembrance of mortality, which, held rightly, does not depress but clarifies. The Stoics kept the phrase memento mori, remember that you will die, not to sink into gloom, but because the awareness of life's end makes its living urgent and precious. A thing that lasts forever can be taken for granted. A thing that ends must be valued now. Think of how a brush with mortality, your own or someone else's, has a way of stripping life down to what matters, dissolving petty concerns and revealing what is actually important. That clarity is the gift hidden inside the hardest truth. A protected mind learns to hold its own mortality gently in view, not as a source of dread, but as a source of focus, letting the finiteness of life sharpen its sense of what to spend that life on. You do not have to dwell morbidly on death or let it shadow your days. You only have to let the quiet awareness that your time is limited clarify how you use it, to stop postponing what matters, to release what does not. The pettiness that consumes so much of life shrinks when measured against its brevity. To remember that you will die is not to darken life, but to illuminate it, to make each ordinary day the rare and finite thing it actually is. A mind that has made peace with its own ending lives more fully in the time it has, protected from wasting a precious, limited life on things that will not matter in the end. The fate you learn to love. The fate you learn to love is one of the most transformative of all the ancient teachings, the practice of meeting whatever happens not with mere endurance, but with a strange and powerful acceptance. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of one's fate, the willingness to embrace what is, including the difficult, rather than wishing reality were otherwise. So much suffering comes from arguing with what has already happened, from the exhausting refusal to accept the unchangeable. Think of how much lighter a hardship becomes the moment you stop fighting the fact of it and begin instead to ask what it might teach or offer. How acceptance itself releases a weight. A protected mind learns to meet its fate with something more than resignation, to work with reality rather than against it, to find, even in difficulty, a strange usefulness or meaning. You do not have to pretend to like painful things or stop working to improve your situation. You only have to stop wasting your strength railing against what cannot be changed, to accept the reality you are actually in, and to move forward from there, rather than from the wish that it were different. What has happened has happened. The only question is how you meet it now. To accept your fate, and even, in time, to find a way to embrace it, is to stop suffering twice, once from the event, and again from the resistance to it. A mind that can love its fate is nearly unbreakable, because it has stopped fighting reality and started, at last, to work with it. The judge you keep only inside. The judge you keep only inside is a source of stability that many never discover. The practice of measuring yourself by your own considered values rather than by the verdict of the crowd. Most people carry an external judge, an internalized audience whose approval they constantly seek and whose disapproval they dread. But the Stoics pointed toward an inner judge instead, your own conscience, your own honest assessment of whether you are living according to your values, as the only verdict that truly matters. Think of the difference between doing something because others will approve and doing it because you know it is right, and how much steadier the second feels, how much less it can be shaken by the reactions of others. A protected mind learns to consult its own inner judge, to ask not what will people think, but am I acting in line with who I want to be? You do not have to ignore all outside perspective or become arrogant, deaf to correction. You only have to shift the seat of judgment inward, to let your own honest conscience, rather than the fluctuating crowd, be the measure of your life. When your judge lives inside you, others lose the power to unsettle you with their approval and disapproval, because you are no longer looking to them for the verdict. To measure yourself by your own values, kept honestly and reviewed regularly, is to find a stability that no external opinion can shake. The deep peace of a person who answers, first and finally, to their own conscience. The calm you return to. The calm you return to is not a place you reach once and keep forever, but a home you learn to come back to again and again. And the returning is the whole skill. No one stays perfectly calm. Life disturbs everyone, and the wise are not those who are never shaken, but those who have learned the way back to their own center. The Stoics understood tranquility not as a permanent state, but as a practice, a repeated returning to equilibrium after each disturbance. Think of how, after being upset, there is always a path back to steadiness, and how that path grows more familiar the more often you walk it, until returning to calm becomes almost quick. A protected mind does not demand of itself a calm it can never sustain. It learns, instead, the route home, the breath, the pause, the wider view, the inner fortress, so that no matter how far a storm carries it, it knows the way back. You do not have to be unshakable or ashamed when you are shaken. You only have to trust that the calm is always there to return to, that being disturbed is not a failure but simply part of being human, and that the way back is always open. Each time you return to your center, the path grows clearer until steadiness becomes less a struggle and more a homecoming. To know that you can always find your way back to calm, however far you have been carried, is one of the deepest protections of all, because it means no disturbance is permanent, and peace is never more than a few breaths away. The strength that bends. The strength that bends is a truth that overturns our usual idea of resilience, because what survives the storm is not the rigid thing, but the flexible one. We imagine strength as hardness, as never yielding, but the tree that will not bend is the one the wind breaks, while the supple tree, bending low, springs back when the storm has passed. Psychologists studying resilience find much the same, that the people who endure hardship best are not the most unbending, but the most adaptable, able to yield without breaking, to grieve and recover, to bend and return. Think of a time your rigid determination to hold firm only made you more brittle, and how, when you finally allowed yourself to bend, to feel, to adapt, you found a deeper and more lasting strength. A protected mind learns that true resilience is flexible, that it can yield to a hardship without being destroyed by it, that bending is not the same as breaking. You do not have to be hard, unyielding, or endlessly stoic in the shallow sense, which only makes you brittle. You only have to become supple, able to feel your feelings and recover, to adapt to what comes, rather than rigidly resisting it. The strongest people are not those who never bend, but those who bend and return, again and again, without breaking. To hold your strength lightly, as flexibility rather than rigidity, is to become far harder to break, and a mind that can bend with life's storms outlasts the one that tries only to stand rigid against them. The citadel you already are. The citadel you already are is the truth this entire tier has been circling, that the fortress you have been learning to build was, in a sense, always there, waiting to be recognized. Every strength in this tier, the inner keep, the refused insult, the loved fate, the returned calm, is not something added to you from outside, but something uncovered within, a capacity that was yours all along, beneath the noise and the fear. The wisdom traditions do not so much construct this inner stronghold as reveal it, pointing you back to a steadiness that was always present. Think of how these truths, when you hear them, feel less like new information and more like remembering something you already knew, some deep part of you nodding in recognition. That recognition is the citadel knowing itself. A protected mind comes to understand that its deepest security was never a thing to acquire, but a thing to remember. That beneath every anxiety and every wound is a core of steadiness that has never once been destroyed. You do not have to build yourself into something stronger from nothing. You only have to uncover the strength that is already there, to clear away the fear and the noise until the citadel beneath stands revealed. You are not weak and trying to become strong. You are already, at your core, unconquered, and the whole practice is simply remembering it. Rest tonight in this, the deepest protection of all, that the fortress is not something you must finish building before you are safe. It is what you already, quietly, unshakably, are. The suffering you add yourself. The suffering you add yourself is one of the most freeing things a mind can ever come to understand, that a great deal of our pain is not caused by events, but added by us on top of them. There is the pain of a thing that happens, which is often unavoidable. And then there is the layer we build upon it, the resistance, the story, the replaying, the fear. And this second layer, the wise have long noticed, is where most suffering actually lives. An old teaching describes two arrows, the first being the unavoidable pain of life, the second being the suffering we add through our reaction, and it observes that only the first is required. Think of a difficulty in your life and how much of the pain came from the event itself, and how much from the hours you spent resisting it, resenting it, fearing it, replaying it in the dark. A protected mind learns to feel the first arrow while sparing itself the second, to meet the unavoidable pain without heaping needless suffering on top. You do not have to become numb or pretend that nothing hurts. Real pain is real. You only have to notice how much of your suffering is added, the extra weight your own mind piles onto an already heavy thing, and to begin, gently, to set that added weight down. The event may be fixed, but the second arrow is optional. To feel what genuinely hurts without multiplying it, without the endless resisting and rehearsing, is to lift an enormous burden that was never required, and to discover how much lighter even a hard life becomes when you stop wounding yourself on top of it. The enough you already are. The enough you already are is the truth that dissolves the deepest anxiety of all, the quiet, lifelong fear that you are not sufficient, that you must become more before you are worthy of rest or love or peace. So much striving, so much exhaustion comes from the belief that your worth is conditional, something to be earned through achievement, approval, or endless self-improvement. But the wisest voices across every tradition point to the same quiet truth, that your fundamental worth was never in question, that you are, at your core, already enough. Think of how you have chased the feeling of being enough through accomplishment after accomplishment, and how the feeling never arrived from outside, because it was never out there to be found. A protected mind comes to rest in its own sufficiency, to understand that while it can grow and improve, its basic worth does not depend on any of it, that it is enough, right now, tonight, unearned and unconditional. You do not have to stop growing or abandon your goals, which have their own joy. You only have to release the exhausting belief that you must become worthy, to recognize that the worthiness was always already there, beneath the striving. You are not a project that must be completed before you deserve peace. You are, and have always been, enough. To rest in this, even for one night, is to lay down the heaviest burden a person can carry, the endless labor of trying to earn a worth that was yours from the very beginning, freely and completely. The control you can finally release. The control you can finally release is one of the greatest reliefs available to a human mind, the letting go of the exhausting need to manage everything, to hold the whole world in place through sheer effort and worry. So much of our tension comes from trying to control the uncontrollable, gripping outcomes, other people, the future, the past, as though our vigilance were what kept everything from falling apart. But it is not, and the grip only exhausts us. The wisdom traditions speak of a deep peace that comes from surrender, not the surrender of giving up, but the surrender of releasing what was never in our hands. Think of the relief you have felt in rare moments of true letting go, when you finally stopped trying to control something and simply allowed it to be, and how the world did not collapse, but somehow held. A protected mind learns to loosen its grip, to do what is genuinely within its power, and to release the rest, trusting that it does not have to hold everything together through will alone. You do not have to become passive or stop acting where you can. You only have to stop the exhausting effort of controlling what cannot be controlled, to open your hands and let the uncontrollable be what it is. The world does not depend on your worry. Things unfold, and much of it was never yours to manage. To release the need for control is to put down a weight you were never meant to carry, and to discover a peace that no amount of gripping could ever provide. The deep rest of a mind that has finally stopped trying to hold up the sky. The story you get to rewrite. The story you get to rewrite is one of the most quietly powerful freedoms you possess, because while you cannot change what happened to you, you can change the meaning you give it. The events of your life are fixed, but the story you tell about them, what they meant, who you became because of them, whether they broke you or shaped you, is still being written, and the pen is in your hand. Psychologists who study how people heal find that those who reframe their hardships as sources of growth rather than only of damage recover more fully, because meaning is something we make, not something we merely receive. Think of a painful chapter of your life and how the same events could be told as a story of victimhood or a story of survival, of what was done to you or of what you became, and how different those two stories feel. A protected mind learns that it is the author of its own narrative, that it can hold its past honestly while choosing a meaning that gives strength rather than only pain. You do not have to deny what happened or force a false brightness onto real wounds. You only have to recognize that the meaning is not fixed, that you can tell the truth of your life in a way that honors both the hurt and the strength it forged. Your past is not a sentence handed down. It is a story still being written, and you hold the pen. To rewrite the meaning of what you have lived, gently and honestly, is to reclaim your life from what happened to it, and to become, at last, the author, rather than only the subject. The peace that needs no reason. The peace that needs no reason is the deepest kind. The discovery that calm does not have to be earned or justified by circumstances, that it can simply be chosen and rested in, here, now, without waiting for life to become perfect first. We tend to believe that we will be at peace once things are sorted, once the problem is solved, the goal reached, the worry resolved, and so we postpone peace endlessly into a future that never quite arrives. But the wise have always known that peace is available in the present, unconditionally, not as a reward for a solved life, but as a way of meeting an unsolved one. Think of a moment of unexpected calm that arrived for no reason at all, in the middle of ordinary difficulty, and how it revealed that peace was not waiting on the far side of your problems, but available right through them. A protected mind learns that it does not have to wait for perfect conditions to rest, that it can find a quiet center even amid the unfinished and the uncertain. You do not have to solve everything first or wait until life is calm to be calm. You only have to recognize that peace is a place you can enter now, regardless of circumstances, a stillness beneath the surface of any storm. The problems will still be there tomorrow, and you can meet them then, rested. Tonight, you are allowed a peace that asks for no reason and waits for no resolution, a calm that is simply available, always beneath everything. To a mind that remembers it, can choose to rest. The shadow you make your friend. The shadow you make your friend is one of the most profound protections of all. The willingness to know and accept the parts of yourself you would rather not see. Each of us carries what the psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow, the disowned parts of ourselves, the anger, the envy, the fear, the flaws we hide even from our own awareness. And the parts we refuse to see do not disappear. They simply run us from the dark, leaking out in ways we cannot control. Jung taught that wholeness comes not from being only good, but from integrating the shadow, from bringing the hidden parts into the light of awareness where they lose their power to sabotage us. Think of a trait in yourself you cannot stand, that you have pushed down and refused to look at, and how it tends to surface anyway, in moments you did not choose. A protected mind learns to turn toward its own shadow with honesty and even compassion, to know its darker parts rather than denying them, because what is seen can be worked with, and what is hidden cannot. You do not have to act on every dark impulse or hate yourself for having one. You only have to stop pretending the shadow is not there, to acknowledge the whole of yourself, the light and the dark alike. A person who knows their shadow cannot be manipulated through it, cannot be as easily shamed or provoked, because they have already faced what is within. To make peace with your own shadow, to know yourself fully and accept what you find, is to become whole, and a whole person. Hiding nothing from themselves is protected in the deepest way there is. The meaning you choose to make. The meaning you choose to make is perhaps the final and greatest strength, the recognition that meaning is not handed to us by the universe, but created by us through what we love, how we live, and the significance we choose to give our days. There is a freedom in this that can feel dizzying at first, and then, slowly, becomes the ground of a well-lived life. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who found meaning even in the worst of human suffering, taught that the search for meaning is the central human drive, and that we can discover or create it in any circumstance, through our work, our love, or the stance we take toward unavoidable pain. Think of the moments your life has felt most meaningful, and how the meaning came not from the world announcing it, but from your own caring, your own commitment, your own choice to treat something as sacred. A protected mind learns that it is not waiting for the universe to reveal its purpose, but is quietly authoring that purpose through how it chooses to live. You do not have to find some grand cosmic meaning written in the stars, or despair if none appears. You only have to recognize that meaning is yours to make, that in choosing what to love and how to live, you are creating the significance of your own existence. This is not a lesser meaning for being self-made. It is the truest kind, woven from your own deepest values. To know that you are the author of your life's meaning is the final freedom, the one that no external force can ever take, and a mind that makes its own meaning has found the most unshakable protection of all. The weight you set down now. The weight you set down now is everything this long descent has slowly been loosening, and it does not have to be carried for one more moment tonight. All the striving, all the vigilance, all the effort of protecting and proving and managing, you are allowed to lay it all down now, here, in the dark. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Nothing needs to be defended or earned or figured out. The mind you have been building, level by level, was never meant to be a mind always working, always guarding, but a mind that knows, finally, when it is safe to rest. And you are safe now. The doors are locked. The day is done. There is nothing you must do in this moment but breathe, and let the weight you have carried so far, so faithfully, grow lighter in your hands. You do not have to hold any of it right now. You have learned what you have learned, and it will still be there in the morning, quietly yours. For now, let it go soft. Let the striving cease. Let the whole long effort of the day settle and still. The weight can wait. It is not going anywhere, and neither are you, and there is nothing left tonight but to set it gently down and rest. The safety you carry within. The safety you carry within is the quiet truth at the very end of all of this, that everything you have gathered here, the steadiness, the clear sight, the boundaries, the inner fortress, was never really out there in the world, but always inside you. You do not have to make the world safe to be safe. You carry your safety with you now, in a mind that has learned to steady itself, to see clearly, to hold its own peace. Wherever you go, it goes. Whatever comes, you meet it with this. And so there is nothing to brace against tonight, nothing to guard, because the protection was never a wall against the world, but a calm within yourself. And it is with you now, and it will be with you when you wake. Let that be enough. Let yourself feel how safe you actually are, here, in this quiet, held by a steadiness you have carried all along. There is nothing to protect against now. There is only rest, and the deep, quiet safety you will always carry within you. The quiet that holds you. The quiet that holds you is where this ends, and where you let everything go. There is nothing more to learn tonight, nothing more to understand, or build, or become. There is only the dark, and the warmth, and the soft weight of your own tiredness, and a stillness so complete it asks nothing of you at all. You are safe. You are enough. You are held. Let the thoughts drift far away now, like something happening in another room. Let the breath slow on its own. Let the last of the day dissolve into the quiet. There is nothing left to do but rest, nothing to guard, nothing to carry, nothing to fear. You have everything you need here within you, and it will still be there in the morning. For now, let it all grow soft and dark and still. Let the quiet hold you. Let yourself, at last, sleep.